Greg Wycliffe, thanks for joining me today. I haven't talked to you in a little bit. I was actually on your channel a while ago. We did kind of a collab thing. We had you on my channel for a segment, and then I was on your channel for a good chat. And I had such a good time with that chat. I wanted to have you on here to introduce you more to my audience and in more of an intimate setting, because like there's just a lot you have to say and it's hard to cover it in like a 10-minute bit. um but just real quick, tell everybody who you are, where they can find you before we just get into things.
Yeah, sure. So thank you first and foremost for having me again, Clyde. I also had a lot of fun collaborating with you. My name is Greg Wycliffe, born and raised in Canada. I originally worked in radio and media studies, and then I found myself running for the PPC in 2019, back when it really wasn't popular. And that pushed me into creating content to create my own videos to fight the misinformation coming from the mainstream media about Maxime Bernier and our party. And from there, soon after that, the pandemic hit in 2020, and I kind of kept making content on lockdown. And before I knew it, that was something that started to, garner a following. The trucker convoy came. I went there, and I got interviewed over 300 different people there. So now sometimes people call me a journalist, which is not something that I set out to do. Just like I didn't set out to run for politics either. But in this state of the country of Canada, it seemed to be a calling that spoke to me. So I pursued it. And yeah, now I'm, trying to make the best sort of content to wake people up. I try to fight demoralization. I try to fight the apathy in Canada. And of course, I always try to wake up the normie, as I like to say. And yeah, really just educate Canadians on like what's going on in this country. Because I think it is something worth talking about, something worth caring about more as well. But thank you so much for having me again, Clyde.
Absolutely. And you do music. That's the thing that really gets me.
Oh yeah.
Like the music that you do is amazing. Like it's studio quality, like good stuff. It's not your typical YouTuber just plunking away on something doing a parody. Like your parodies are spot on, like really good.
Thank you. Thank you. The professional releases aren't just me though. It's Greg Arcade. You can find him at gregarcade.com. For my professional releases, he is the producer, he is the wizard who brings the music together. But I appreciate you saying that. I'm much more of like a singer-songwriter type. Like I can bring the song together, I can write it. Um, but yeah, it all started my first like big video was Canadians Are Gullible. And that was during the 2019 election. Canadian people are so gullible. Climate change, let's tax them on top.
Oh, okay. The Katy, was
Um,
that Katy Perry parody sort of thing?
yeah.
The California.
Canadians tax them to heat their homes. Canadians tax them while they drive home.
There's a lot of truth to that. There's a
Yeah.
lot of truth to that. So this was a big thing for me when, well, for forever, for a long time. So I'm a dual citizen. Like, let's
Mm,
clear the air here for a lot of people. I'm a dual
okay.
citizen. I'm American, Canadian. I've always lived in Canada, except for a
So
short
you
amount
have
of
an
time.
escape route. You have an
And
easy
I haven't
escape route if
taken
you need
it.
to.
I haven't taken it. Okay.
Hey, good on you. Good on you.
So, so that's the thing. But so I have dual citizenship, as they call it, and for me, it's like I could move to the States if I wanted to. My wife doesn't want to, that's for sure. And my my kids will have the opportunity to have that. But I've lived in Canada my whole life, except for, like I said, a short stint where I was living in Japan, and I wasn't living in America. I lived in America for like a year when I was a year old. And I've always lived in
Mm.
border towns for most of my life. That's why Windsor, Ontario was my place I grew up. I was born in Sault Ste. Marie. And
Cool.
I've because I've had like this. My dad's American, my mom's actually Scottish, but we always had this thing where like Canadians just kind of roll over. What is this?
Mm.
What is it? Like my whole life I felt this way, and because I lived so close to American culture, but I never lived in it, I was always thinking like, why is it that like Americans will like the smallest thing, they'll want to change like they'll change the recipe for the meat sauce at Taco Bell, and they're like, pew pew pew, no, ain't
Up.
happening, not on my watch, right? And
Yeah.
and
This is America,
right?
Okay.
I thought
This
it was
is
in America.
How dare
right?
you? Yeah.
This is a place where we make the decisions. We the people. We don't let decisions get made for us. And to have this, like, even in my own home, to see like this difference of opinion, and then just watch all the people around me when stuff is just going downhill and people just roll over. And I grew up in Ontario, so like it's rollover capital of Canada. Well, we could get into the Western provinces later if you want to talk about that. But what is it? What is it about Canadian culture, and why is it that we just take it? And the Freedom Convoy for me, like for a lot of people, was like the thing that made me like so proud. We're not doing it anymore, right? But why?
We're not rolling over.
We're not rolling over. But yeah, forever. It's always been that here.
I am still trying to crack that code and figure that out, man. I'm still trying to figure that out. I did not follow politics for a lot of my life. I was very much a normie Canadian myself. I was just going to university. I would probably call myself like center left, like just kind of like a liberal, whatever. But never followed politics. And really, the more prominent thing, if I was following anything politics related, it was usually from the States. It was usually through pop culture. It was usually through, you know, osmosis from other places. It was never actually following it. And when I first started to follow Canadian politics, like the first thing that happened was I saw Justin Trudeau, and I thought, oh, it's a young guy. They really pitched him as a young guy, even though he's not a young guy. But it's like, oh, some young guy is going to, become prime minister maybe. And I looked him up. I looked him up on Wikipedia immediately. And I'm like, let's see what his work history is. And I thought to myself, is this it? Is this all of the work history?
Well,
This
they
guy's
hyped the
he's
guy
been a
up on
chronic
the fact
student?
that he was the son of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and that was like the whole thing of what they wanted to hold up.
Yeah, of course. And but for someone who's never really followed it before, I was looking at his work experience. I was hearing about Harper and how he has a good like economic record. And I also saw the same thing happening on my not the same thing, but this new phenomenon happening on my Facebook feed, which was the absolute vilification of Harper. Like you've probably seen the iconic image of the Syrian refugee child face down in the sand. And I remember these posts on my Facebook page where it was like, Harper did this. He's caused this Syrian child to drown with his bare hands. And I remember seeing this sort of absurd vilification of Harper and this sort of like halo effect around Trudeau. And I'm like, this guy has no work experience. So that's when I started to pay attention. But back to the point you brought up.
I want to get into that because I remember that time.
Sure.
I remember I was still a Facebook user at the time. I can't stand that site at all. So sorry if anybody's trying to get a hold of me on Facebook. It ain't gonna happen. But I remember a lot of my friends being like so anti-Harper at the time, and I was living out west here in British Columbia, and like dudes that I didn't know from anything else except being ski bums, and they're like, we have to vote Trudeau in, and we got to get Harper out, and it was
Got to.
It was like, well, what? And I remember engaging with them, saying, well, what is it that you're against? And I wasn't a pro Harper guy. Like, don't get me wrong. I hate politicians. I really do. I think they're all slimy. But like, you gotta be engaged. I think you need to be engaged in the political system. I even emailed Harper at one point. And this is funny. He actually got back to me, or his office got back to me, because I did it as just a little joke for myself. I emailed him to say, "Hey, I'm with this company, I own this company. I wanted to get into this new financial game. When we had this idea, I'm gonna we're gonna call it the double down, the CPP double down, and we're gonna double down all your contributions to CPP, your Canadian Pension Plan, and if you double down, then we'll double down the payouts all those years down the road. And I said in the letter, I said, but I spoke to my lawyer, and my lawyer said you can't do that. It's not legal. That's a Ponzi scheme. And I said, well, I'm writing you today, Mr. Harper, to see why have you explained to my lawyer why this is not a Ponzi scheme, in fact, and that it's a legal thing because the Canadian government does it. And of course, I got a letter back saying, and I mean, I was mad because I was paying too much taxes and I was young, right? And
Yeah.
and they sent me back a letter, the staffer did, and they said, well, it's because of the compulsory nature of the CPP is why it works. And yeah, they just gave me a runaround, right? Anyway, I'm derailing what you were talking about Harper. But I do remember how like vehemently people were saying we have to get rid of the guy. And I didn't think he was, I think he was great because I thought he was kind of selling us out to the Chinese, but at the same time, it could have been worse. We didn't get the huge shock from the '08 economic crisis because they were fiscally conservative at the time. I thought it was a plus.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it was, if I have an accurate perception of Canadian politics back then, because this was my first time paying attention.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it's like, it's hard to gauge whether this was something new or or not. But, the way I saw it at the time was this feels like American style politics is starting to kind of take off. And I mean that as in it's all about showboating. It's all about, the propaganda. But, that's probably the way politics has always been. So maybe that's a little bit, a little bit misguided. Maybe it's just my first time paying attention.
No, I think you're right about that. Actually, like
Really?
yeah, I do think you're right about that because I didn't pay too much attention, but I did pay attention at the time, and I was more in tune with American politics at the time as well because I was a big fan of the Ron Paul guy when he was running to be the nominee for the Republican Party at one point. And Ron Paul, he was saying like, we need hard money. We need to be fiscally conservative. We need to go back to the gold standard and all of that stuff, right? And I was really into that. I thought it was a great idea, and I watched them just destroy him with the media. The media apparatus just absolutely annihilated him. And for what? Like they ruined the guys. They ruined the guy. Like, I mean, I don't think they ruined him completely. He was a self-made man. He did well, but they ruined any chances of him representing himself accurately in the media. Like, people were calling him a racist. He didn't seem like a racist guy at all. Like, I don't think he ever wrote anything racist. Yeah. And all of this stuff. And they turned every one of their supporters into like enemies of the state. They like people who just wanted to go back. And it's like the whole argument of going back. It wasn't like we want to go back to the olden days. No, they wanted to go back to a like better economic policy is what people were saying. Like let's have that, and then maybe we can have a future. It doesn't.
And if people talk about cancel culture, and if you look into history, it's always been around, really. This sort of, hey, we're going to target you and destroy your reputation because we don't like your ideas. What's happened to Ron Paul is really nothing new, and it's super common now. Not just in Canada, not just in North America, but around the world, the same sort of thing happens. Like if you are opposing, World Economic Forum, UN Sustainable Development Agenda items, if you are opposing this as a politician, you are probably going to get your reputation dragged through the mud. You're probably going to get called all sorts of names, isms and ists, and all the bad words. And it's very consistent. Like this is a very consistent pattern that you'll see once again, not just in North America, but around the world. If you oppose this agenda, if you oppose this agenda and you're being effective, and you're actually gaining popularity, and you're persuasive and charismatic, and you're kind of growing in popularity, then all of a sudden the media all at once is going to come to try and destroy your reputation and call you all these names. Do they make sense? Is it justified? Not at all, but it doesn't matter because now your reputation is tarnished and it's made your job way, way, way harder. And in some cases, it almost impossible, because if you do the numbers, crunch the numbers of how many people are watching the media versus, are actually sifting out the true information online, it just becomes a totally uphill battle. But yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because it's almost become such a common pattern and common phenomenon now in modern
Yeah,
politics,
you
right?
don't go after people for their ideas. You go after other things to like avert people's attention away from their ideas. Like, no, don't look at their
Mm,
ideas. That might be
mhm.
enticing. People might like that.
Yeah,
Look at this bad
it's
stuff about this person. And I'm sure you can pull up unsavory things about anybody if you dig hard enough. Like, that's just
absolutely,
it's just the way,
absolutely.
people have embarrassing things and then they don't want to talk about it, and then they can make a big awful thing about the things that people don't want to talk. But like, look at Ron Paul. Like, he really didn't have anything. He had no skeletons in his closet, except like, I think there was like an old flyer, and somebody wrote on the flyer, somebody wrote something that sounded quasi racist on the flyer, and then they buried the guy for it, you know and there goes his
It's all it
chances.
takes.
That's all it
It's all
took.
it takes.
But
Yeah,
I
and
think he
it's
would
it
have been good. But I mean, people could disagree with me there, and I accept that, absolutely. But let ideas go on their merits, because this is really gross. Like, the way we've been going and it's been taking off around the world. People call it American style politics, but is it? Like, if it's happening everywhere, is it really American style politics at this point? Like, maybe it originated there, but so did like blue jeans and steaks. I don't know. Like, this is.
and the other thing as well too, like the more I learn about politics, the more I'm, having a more cynical perspective and thinking, is this even American style politics, or is this just politics period? And I think the main thing to like really give you the cynical pill, in my opinion, of how politics works is, first and foremost, you have to accept the reality that 80% of people have medium to low intelligence. Second of all, that means all your messaging needs to thrive upon that, i.e., people don't really care about the policies. You need to speak to the common person, okay? Like the non-sophisticate, as Roger Stone calls it. And on top of all that, it's like it's literally a propaganda war. It's literally a population or a popularity contest. It's not like one. It literally is. And along with that, it's gossip, gossip, gossip. It's oh my God, did you see what they said to her, or this thing that they were wearing, or this nickname that really stuck? And we saw, like, that's kind of how Trump won. He kind of exploited all of these things that like the cynicism. He embraced the cynicism of politics, and he was using bumper stickers like MAGA. He was using like nicknames like low energy Jeb Bush or whatever
It
his different
works.
nicknames were.
It
And
works.
it worked. And it worked. And it's like, does anybody know a policy that voted? No, they know make America great again. Does anyone know any Justin Trudeau policies? No, it's just real change, climate change. I will save planet. Oh my God. Hey, he stopped poverty. Good. Like there's no sentences over 5 words allowed, Clyde, in the world of politics. If you want to win, anyway. It's scary though. It's scary, right?
Well, I think there is like a social intelligence to being able to reach so many people. I think
Definitely. Yeah.
that's I, some people will call it dumbing down the conversation. I don't think so. Like, what one thing that drives me nuts is when people try to talk to you and try to talk to you. Ever talk to somebody who like wants to sound smart, and they use big words, like they studied a thesaurus, and they want to use the word that they're common to using, but they'll just like throw that thesaurus word in there, like
Sure.
just to
Yeah.
see the reaction on people's faces, like, that person didn't understand the words that I just said. But isn't that the point though? The point is to make sure that the maximum amount of people that you're communicating with will understand what it is that you're saying. Like, I even, when I'm doing my show, if I give it an acronym, I'll say what the acronym means, because I know there's a lot of people out there that aren't in tune with what that acronym means. And I do this as a mechanic because we have
A lot of acronyms.
a lot of abbreviations and acronyms and all these things, right? And apparently honk honk is one we heard from.
Yeah.
But
Bro.
we have a lot of them, and I talk to service writers. I'm a mechanic by trade, and when I'm talking to the service writers, they're not mechanics. They didn't go to school for that. They know how to call customers and find parts. Like that, they're really skilled at that, and that's where we want their skills to be. We don't need to understand every little in and out. That could come with time, but it's not necessary. So when I'm explaining something, I'm giving them the proper definition. I can't speak to them as if they're an expert. And then if a customer comes in, I can't speak to the customer as if they're an expert. That makes me look stupid. So when I see somebody acting like that, and they're talking to a group of people, and they're using big words that specific terms that they know is outside of the realm of the group of people that they're talking to, I feel that they're idiots. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
maybe idiot's not the right word, but like they're doing it for their own ego in that moment, and they're negating the opportunity to actually reach the largest number of people possible, and they're inhibiting their own communication ability for their own ego, and it's terrible.
Yeah, they're not communicating well. You know, the whole point of talking to somebody is to communicate an idea to them. And if you know that they're not going to understand the verbiage you're using, then yeah, you're not communicating very well, are you?
No.
And yeah, in the world of politics in Canada, anyway, you know, the Liberal Party is become incredibly effective at this. And I think why it gets really scary these days is, you know, I was running for the PPC in 2019, as I said, and I was at this debate for the environment. Okay. And like I had the Communist Party of Canada come and like protest against me. Can't debate hate. Refugees are welcome here. It was pretty intense. Okay. I had grown men from the NDP party and the Green Party turning their backs on me every time that I spoke at this environment debate. It was totally surreal.
You're kidding me. Like that was the actual, like these were actual candidates that were running for office in Canada.
Yeah.
And they were turning their back. For what reason? What were their stated reasons?
Well, it's to show everybody at the debate to display their quality of leadership, Clyde. That's why.
Well, that's obviously not a quality of leadership, straight up. I mean, even if you disagree with somebody, like, why not just say, I disagree with you, I think your ideas are bad, and you know, and then move on. You don't have to. I mean, obviously, if you're having a debate about climate change. Hold on, I got to wrap my head around this. So they came to a debate about climate change. You came as an objecting point of view to theirs, and they turned their back.
No, it was. I was on the debate stage. You know, it was me, the conservative guy, NDP, Green, and the Liberal. And every time that I stood to speak, they would also stand and turn their backs.
That's so childish.
That's the perfect word for it. Yeah.
That's absolutely childish. I mean, like, I'm trying to teach my 8-year-old not to behave like that right now. Right. I'm not kidding. Well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, dude, it was a wild time. That campaign was crazy. It was very surreal because, you know, actually making the decision to join Canadian politics, I thought, yeah, you know, things aren't going great in this country. It's kind of scary. And then the campaign happened and stuff like this is happening. And I'm like, this is really scary. This is actually a lot worse than I thought it was. Oh my goodness.
That is worse than I thought. I had no idea that actual like mainstay politicians that were part of like a main political party are behaving like that.
Yeah. It's like children.
But you're the PPC, so and I didn't know you were actually a member of the PPC. I knew you advocated for them, and I knew that you all the stuff that you do on YouTube, but I didn't know you were actually a candidate and that you ran.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, I
that's
was a candidate back in 2019.
That's
Yep.
insane. That's insane. But no, it's cool because I think people, if they have a conviction, they should run for office in whatever capacity that they can. I think I personally, like, a lot of people tell me, Clyde, you should run. I'm like, I think I do a better job with what I'm doing right now at getting the message out than as a politician.
Yeah. At the time, I did not want to run. It was actually someone very close to me at the time who encouraged me to run because there was kind of a vacant neighboring riding. And I thought, maybe I can make some noise. Maybe I can kind of bring attention to this. I'm probably not going to win, obviously not, but I can. I saw some other candidates, and I thought, okay, I can probably be a better public speaker than this person. But yeah, I mean, the highlights aside from getting my grown men turning their back on me at a debate,
That's still
I
insane to
had
me.
I had an 18-year-old volunteer who spoke fluent Polish, by the way. We were in a Polish neighborhood. He was 18-year-old getting intimidated by a man like twice his age, shouted at, like, get out of here, racist, get out of here, racist, like totally like hostile. And I had to go over to the grown man again and say, like, sir, like, do you mind? This guy's a volunteer. He's 18. Like, is there something you want to talk about? That was ridiculous. I also had a
Wait, was
volunteer of
was he was he with your party? Like, he was one of your volunteers with you?
yeah, he was just a volunteer with me. We were knocking doors. We were on the street, and then this guy said, "Get out of here, you racist!" And it was just like, dude, like he's a volunteer, man. Like
That's
he's 18
scary.
years old.
Holy cow. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
this is Toronto, Parkdale High Park, by the way. This is kind of like when they say it's like it's a crazy socialist riding. Yeah, it kind of is a crazy socialist. Like there's people who are pretty nuts in there. Um,
Wow.
and then another time, right in Parkdale, volunteer named Joshua. He's this Indian gentleman, really great guy, a Christian. He's volunteering with me on the street corner there in Parkdale. I want to say like King and Jameson or something like this.
Mhm.
And he's getting vegetables thrown at him for wearing like a PPC button for representing the PPC. So like
So,
I don't know if you call this assault or like being harassed, but it's
okay,
yeah.
maybe there's some Americans watching or somebody who doesn't know who the PPC is. Can you explain them just briefly? Like,
Sure,
what are...
yeah, yeah. Sure. So the People's Party of Canada was founded in 2018 by Maxime Bernier. Maxime Bernier was a Conservative Party MP, and he
Hey,
was
Joe, can you
actually
pull up the PPC's like website and just bring that up while you're
yeah,
sorry, keep going.
Yeah,
yeah, of course. So the story goes, it was going to be Maxime Bernier and Andrew Scheer. These were the two people who were fighting for the Conservative Party leadership, I believe in 2018 when this voting happened. Miraculously, Maxime Bernier lost by like a hair. And guess what? If I'm not mistaken, they were using Dominion voting systems, by the way, for this vote in the Conservative Party between Andrew Scheer and Maxime Bernier.
Well, before
But
you get
soon after,
into election fraud allegations, no, I'm kidding. Here's the website. Here's the website of the. This is like an official party in Canada. This isn't some weird fringe thing. This is, yeah, they're a small party. They're not like they're
is it 4 or 5% of the vote, something like that?
yeah. So I'll start from the beginning. They started their party. He was against mass migration. That was a very popular talking point. He was further right than the Conservative Party. I wouldn't even people like to try and call the PPC far right, but they're really just actually right wing. Like they're not. There's really nothing too extreme about what we're talking about in our platform. But the big kind of claim to fame is that we are the fastest growing political party in Canadian history. Like within months of starting, like I want to say, was it 40,000 members like joined?
that's huge.
And
Okay, compare that to the
yeah,
NDP when they got first started. Like, how well did they do?
or dude, even the Green Party, like,
The Green Party's been
but
trying my
yeah,
whole life. They're not doing.
right. I
They
guess,
never got more than like
yeah,
2 seats ever, I think.
yeah, they've been around for decades, but around 5% of the popular vote, an improvement on its 2019. Yeah, so they got 5% in 2021. I think they only got 1% in the first in 2019. Less than 3.6%. of the popular vote in each riding.
Like
Yeah.
I would argue myself that the PPC isn't, because you hear a lot of this, that they're vote splitting, they're pulling from the conservatives. But I think there's a lot of people from both sides of the aisle, like people from the left and people from the right that are
Part of the
gravitating,
PPC.
gravitating towards the PPC.
There's a
like I don't
there's a
see it
lot
a
of
right as a
former
right party, because
there's a lot of former NDP people who are PPC. One of the main people actually volunteering, who was very helpful during my campaign, was a former NDP
and they're the
supporter.
lefter party, right? So like there's the
Yeah,
liberals, they're
yeah.
the left, and the NDP's the lefter of them, and
Yeah,
they're leaving
and
the
if
lefter
there's
to go to the PPC, which they're saying is far right. I just don't buy it.
yeah, and on top of that, man, like we need to shift. There's a lot of work to do in this country. Okay, there's a lot of work to do in this country to try to get it back on track. And part of the problem is the Overton window is slipping, shifting to the left, because we got the liberals, then we got the NDP, then we got the Green. And as they continue to talk all of their crazy talking points, we're over here. What the Conservative Party is basically like, what? Compromise, going further left as well. And yeah, good we have the PPC. Quite frankly, I think the PPC should be even further right. I want to have like a Bible thumping Christian party that's like popular in Canada, who are saying, absolutely no transgender education, for example. Like that deserves to exist. That talking point, that belief deserves to exist if you're going to have what we have being passed through Parliament, which is, gender isn't real and all sorts of insane stuff. Like what, we're going to allow all these
we can
crazy
get into that, but I'm
talking points
scared of that. I'm scared.
without-
I'm scared of like a Christian right thing, like we saw in the 90s in America. That's terrifying to me, because I grew up during that era when like the Bible Belt
was it scary?
Well, it had a lot of power, and I don't know how do you put it, like.
Okay, so here's your options, Clyde. You either get the Christian right, or you get drag time story hour mandatory at every single public school.
That sucks.
I know that's an unfair choice. Decide. You must choose between one of them. Yeah.
Okay, so here's an example for me where like I'm afraid of the pendulum swinging far the other way and just like being absurdly the other way. I was watching a podcast with
But at this point though, like you're worried about that at this point. Like I'm worried about the pendulum breaking right now and being stuck on that side here in Canada anyway.
I think the pendulum's already swinging the other way. I don't think we're going further to the left.
Who's bringing this? Who's swinging the pendulum back? You think PP swinging it back with his inflation talk? Is that really like a right-wing thing?
I don't think politicians steer things. That's the difference. I think culture comes first, and politics. I think it was Breitbart that said this. Culture. I can't remember. A paraphrase.
Culture is downstream from politics.
Yeah.
They say. Yeah. I don't know if I believe that. I've heard that. I don't know if I believe that anymore. I feel like Trump may have kind of proven that that's wrong, actually.
Oh, yeah, go into that. Yeah, go into that. Because I always thought that was kind of real. And before you get into that, I just want to say to all the Christians out there, I'm not against Christianity. Like, don't get me wrong. I just didn't want to go far the other way. And the point I wanted to make was Elijah Schaffer had a podcast. He's no longer a podcaster, I guess, for The Blaze. But it was... He had Blair White and some other chick who is one of those like lefties that got red pilled and became on the right or center or whatever. And he had this like some Bible thumper dude and this other Bible thumper chick, and they were on this podcast, and they were like way out to lunch, like, you people should not exist. I don't want you people near my children, blah, 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 all this stuff. I'm like, whoa. We all have to like live together. Like, I get it. But, and I'm totally with you on like the drag time story hour stuff and like the indoctrination of kids into this weird gender ideology crap. But once a person's an adult and they want to make up their own decisions, I can't. I want people to have the freedom to make their own choices. To have the ability to be around kids, that might be a different
Yeah.
story. But like,
See,
and that's kind of where I stand on that.
and that's fair. I think the point I'm trying to make is both extremes should be allowed to exist at the same time. Because right now, only one extreme is socially acceptable, and that is the
I don't-
extreme left.
Well, I think the extremes should always like not be taboo, but should raise eyebrows. You get what I mean? Like when you see an extreme of any kind, you should be like, it should take you back. But people aren't taken back
Yep.
by the left. They're afraid to not comply with the left, like the crazy left.
Right, because they have more kind of cultural authority right now. They have more sort of control over the institutions and this sort of thing. But like think of it this way though, Clyde. We have people who don't think gender exists, and that is becoming a very, very popular idea. What is a more extreme idea? Somebody saying that gender doesn't exist, or somebody saying that I don't think two men should be allowed to get married. Like which is a more extreme thing? And you don't have to answer that, but like my point is,
Well, okay,
is
so
we've
I had
gone
to think
so
about it for a
far.
second. I had to think about it for a
We've
second.
gone so far. We've gone so far down this, like kind of like compromising, like liberalism, which in essence, one of the definitions of a liberal is being open-minded, and like we've become so open-minded that we're almost justifying maps. We're almost justifying minor attracted people.
Yeah,
which is
I know that.
I don't know if I should say the word because I know we're on this platform, but it's like that's how far we've gone. And it's like, yeah, I sometimes I just feel like the Bible thumpers were kind of right, or at least at the very least they had a point, because they were saying in the late 90s, hey, if we legalize gay marriage, soon people are going to want to get married to children or get married to animals, or like want to be like handicapped, like, and you've seen this craziness that happens, right? And
So
it's like, damn, they were kind of right. Like the Bible thumpers from the 90s have kind of been right. Hate to say it, but like look around, it's crazy.
I always had a different approach to that, because I always thought, why are we having this debate? Why, when the government shouldn't even be involved in the institution of marriage in the first place? I mean, in Canada, marriage institution was regulated by the government only to keep track of like people's health. It was like if you look at your marriage certificate, if you have one, if you're lucky to have to have one, I'm lucky enough to have one. But if you because she allows me to keep it. But if you if you look at it, it's I think it's like the Ministry of Health, right? And the whole reason why we register for that was so that they could keep track of like diseases and stuff like that, and households, before there was a census and we were legally obligated to do that, which I don't know, anyone's been thrown in jail for not filling out the census form. But my argument's always been, okay, well, we're talking about gay marriage. Why don't we just get the government out of gay marriage? And then if a church wants to marry people or they don't want to marry people, it's up to them. There's a separation of church and state. So I get the Bible thumpers and the argument for the separation of church and state. Like the state should have no right to go into a church and say, you have to operate this way. I think they have zero right. And if they want to discriminate against people with purple hats, discriminate against people with purple hats. I mean, it's like whatever they want to do. If you limit how many people can join your club, well, maybe less people will join your club. And that's kind of the way I look at it. Like if people want to be discriminatory, let them be. And the ostracism of social behaviors, will work its way out. And I think some churches have been like that, and some churches have been okay with the gay marriage thing and whatever. If you were a gay couple, why would you want to force your community to accept you? Like, why would you want to be around a bunch of people that don't want to be around you anyway? That's kind of where I'm at with it. But yeah, for me, it's a separation of church and state issue. I think institutions should not have the government butting in their business.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess the whole reason we went on this tangent is because we were talking about the PPC, and yeah, like we need strong voices to be pushing the Overton window in the other direction, in my opinion. And sometimes that's going to manifest as someone like Archer Pawlowski, a pastor from Calgary, and yeah, like again, I mentioned like the cynicism of politics, and I think another cynical part about it is that you don't get what you ask for. You always get less than that. So in order to get what you actually want, you need to push further in the direction of what you want, and then like the compromise comes kind of closer to the middle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that actually
Does that-
does. So, what was it? Ferryman's Toll. I was talking with him a few weeks back, and he raised a
Mhm.
really good point about that same idea. Is he said
Yep.
in order for the West to have things like equal representation, and I'm getting into the West now, but if they want to have the equal representation, there needs to be a sincere, actual attempt to secede. Like
Yeah.
they won't be taken seriously if it's an empty threat. There needs to be a real threat of
Mhm.
secession
Yeah. And
before Ontario is even going to respect them.
it's kind of like throwing a tantrum. Sure, maybe it seems like like way too much or way too ridiculous, but it gets people's attention and it gets people to take you seriously. And yeah, exactly, absolutely. Um, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that develops, because I hear that all the time of everyone in Alberta who's like, "Yeah, we are serious about this." And really, why wouldn't you be? The way in which, before the pandemic even happened, if I'm not mistaken, like Calgary was already experiencing unemployment issues with young men, just because of the way that the oil and gas industry is like being stifled and prevented from like really really thriving, when it could, when it comes to like this inflation in our economy. It's like it's pretty obvious how we could fix this, guys. Like let's just get rid of, what is it, Bill C-69 and all of this ridiculousness, so we can't build pipelines. But
Well, we'd have a lot of work right there. That's for sure. I don't know if it would fix the inflation. It would make a lot of people in that industry wealthy. And I suppose if you think about it trickling down the line over time, it might you get businesses that prop up around that kind of stuff. I don't know if it would be
mm,
immediate though. Not for all of Canada.
no, 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 of course not.
But I mean, there's a lot of things you could just get rid of on the spending front in government. There's a ton that they spend on what on well we could foreign wars. They're spending on
Hmm.
what was it? I was talking with Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayer Federation a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me that the Canadian government foot the bill of like 500 grand, something stupid, for sex toys in Germany.
Oh, I never heard this one.
Yeah,
Is that right?
it was like some incident where they're funding some
Toys in Germany.
foreign. I think it was for the arts, but it ended up
Mhm.
just buying a bunch of sex toys, like a ton of it.
Yeah.
Joe, can you look that up?
Another
You could probably find that.
crazy one, or like similar to that, is the federal government. I think it's in like the 10 or 20 million to educate sub-Saharan Africa on, women's reproductive rights. And it's like, and if you look at the article too, it's like, well, sub-Saharan Africa is really known to be traditionally conservative. So like, we'll see if this does anything. And it's like, yeah, can we get an update on that $20 million, please, that you sent to sub-Saharan Africa to help with women's reproductive rights?
Wait,
And,
traditionally
and it's,
conservative, so they need to go in and change that? Is that like is that the purview of the Canadian government to get to swing the politics of another country?
I'm, I'm so cynical that when I hear something like that, it's like, okay, so you send a big truckload of money to some like corrupt dictator in sub-Saharan Africa so he can have a golden swimming pool, and you get something, like that's kind of where my head's at.
Okay,
But
so it is said though that what is it? Aid Foreign aid is poor people in rich countries giving money to rich people in poor countries, and that's exactly what you're spelling out right there. Like that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and back to the PPC actually. I gotta remember her name. Crap. She was a PPC candidate from Zimbabwe, refugee actually, and she was like, "Don't call it foreign aid. It's foreign handouts." And it's exactly what you think it is. It's corrupt. It does not go to the actual people. That it's just the corrupt people at the top take this money and do what they want with it. Maybe a tiny little bit trickles down to the people, but it's like no, this does not go to actually help these countries. And and what are we really given as the taxpayer? We get to go see a Government of Canada website where it's like, this is how we spent the $60 million. And then it's like a little like 4 bullet points. That's it. And then maybe there's like a picture of a sign of like a billboard that they put up in sub-Saharan Africa or Zimbabwe. And we're supposed to be like satisfied with that. And like, does the quality of life, do we get any, is there a video? Is there any sort of, follow up on the tens of millions of dollars or probably hundreds of millions and even more over time that kind of goes to these countries? Sure, they're in need, but like, is this, are we getting a return on are we getting a return on our investment? Is this actually going toward something worthwhile and not some corrupt dictator?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's a pretty obvious question, right? Like, it's a pretty, people should want to know the answers to these questions. It's our tax money. And also just like the implications of if they are lying or misleading us, it's like, so you're just lying and just sending money to these corrupt dictators overseas. Like,
yeah,
what kind of racket is this?
Well, well, then the question is, well, what are they getting out of it? What are these politicians getting out of it? Exactly, right? When it comes to money going elsewhere. What's involved? I mean, we've all heard of like the Trudeau Foundation, and then in the States they've got the Clinton Foundation. These are the more famous ones where everything kind of gets laundered through, and somehow they end up really wealthy out of giving aid to other countries around the world through backdoor deals and stuff like that. And I think it's really gross. I think it's really gross. We should really be concentrating on, well, what we can do here. What we can do here with that money. Joe, did you find that sex toys thing?
Yeah, I have it right here.
Let's get this
apparently it's not even that new. It's from 2020.
Oh, okay.
It's just hitting the news cycle again. But yeah, they spent a good chunk of taxpayer money.
I'm glad that picture is small. We probably get in trouble on YouTube for that.
both, yeah. For supporting the thing, as well as, of course, you have to feed people, right? So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they need their banquet dinners and all these other things while they're doing it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the most recently, just a couple of days ago, Canadian Taxpayer Federation put a whole list of wonderful things their government's funding, and we'll put a link to this in the description for people if they want to have their blood pressure raised.
That's exactly what it'll do. Yeah, for sure. Blood pressures. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I'm reading down there. Politicians are raising taxes to paper over the wasteful spending. The federal government spent $8,800 on a sex toy art exhibit in Germany. The Bible thumpers were right.
The Bible thumpers were right. So my thing back in the 90s was they were trying to take away my video games. I don't play video games anymore because I just don't have time. But
the Bible thumpers.
Yeah, that was the big thing. They're taking away that, and then they're, telling you can't have sex ed in school, and then. Well, now I'm scared of sending my kids to sex ed. I don't know what they're teaching them in sex ed. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
How long has it been? It's been like what, 30 years now, and it's like completely flipped.
It's crazy. It is crazy. It is crazy, but like it makes me wonder though, like, is it the same people grabbing the reins of the establishment when they take power? It's like it seems to keep going the same way, and the way that it goes is in removing more rights and making the government bigger. you know, making it bigger and bigger and bigger. No matter which side is in at the helm, right? And who's doing it. I mean, there's a lot of things that, you know, people want to say that was great about Harper, but at the same time, he was signing deals with China to give them our resources raw, like unrefined resources, and then if we can't keep up with our end of the bargain, like say we can't produce as much, they get to fine us if we can't deliver. Like, these were some of the negotiations that was done under Harper. You know, I asked Maxime Bernier about it, and he didn't answer that directly. He did the politician answer and answered what his platform would be. But he was I think finance minister at the time during those deals.
Under Harper, yeah. Yep. No, it's the more you look into the history of the Conservative Party, if I'm not mistaken, Harper helped us sign on to the Sustainable Development Goals. With the UN as well.
That's right.
So,
and these aren't the greatest goals that we have. I mean, okay, so I love the environment. I want to take care of the environment. I want the environment to be clean. I don't know if I'm so bought up on this whole climate catastrophe thing. Like, I know climate change occurs. I know it's happening. I know there's no way that we can't have some sort of impact on it. To what degree that impact is, I'm not sold. I'm not sold, and I'm definitely not sold on the catastrophe side of it. I don't think the world's ending tomorrow or in 5 years or whatever they say it's going to end.
How dare you?
Yeah, how dare you? Oh, speaking of which, Regretta, she had some instant Regretta just recently when she was staging an event. She staged
an arrest, right?
Yeah, she staged an arrest at a protest that I was actually there. I reported on this morning. But the protest had been there for like 200 something days or 200 something weeks.
Oh, really?
I think. Yeah, it was a really long time that protest was there. They called it a village because it had turned into this squat where they actually brought in things to build houses. And you should see all these hippies making their little tree houses and stuff and living in them, right? And I mean, these kids are soft, like they're pampered. They've probably never been camping. And they're out there building houses and not realizing that they're going against all the things that they're advocating for. We need more regulation. We need more regulation. Well, do you have a permit to put up that structure? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, right. Well, all the things that you say we can't do, you're doing, and you're doing it against the law, and you're doing it on somebody's private property, right? And this,
I wonder how many pizzas they delivered there too. Keep them fed. I'm just, like, was there a lot of takeout containers? How are you guys eating? Did you have you have barbecues? Oh no! Oh my god!
Yeah,
burning wood.
How did you heat?
Oh my goodness!
What? How are you heating your food? Propane,
awful.
Butane. Yeah. What? Those things all make CO2, and that goes up into the atmosphere. Yeah, but we're doing it for the cause, so it's carbon neutral.
Yeah. No, we all know that climate activists, they only eat cans of soup, which have been thrown at Van Gogh paintings.
That upset me. That upset me a lot. That upset me a lot. Everyone who knows the channel, I've got a Van Gogh. It's not a real Van Gogh, obviously. My mother painted this, and it's a keepsake for me. She gave it to me. She said she wanted me to have it, and it means a lot. And I know that, like, it's kind of a reminder to mental illness as well. Like, mental illness is a big issue now, but I think it's more of a visible issue. It's been an issue for a long time. Van Gogh suffered from mental illness all that time ago, and he tried to take his own life when he painted that Starry Night. So I get a lump in my throat when I think about it. But it's something that means a lot to me. So I was really upset when those climate activists, and I call them this now. Like, I'm not going to call them environmentalists. I don't think they care about the environment, and that shows. It shows when they go to have these protests, these occupations, if you would. We've heard that term
To
thrown
borrow a
around.
term, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but they'll go and they'll squat on these properties for lengthy periods of time, destroy the environment, um, like defecating, urinating all over the place. We're talking about too much ammonia in the ground with farmers. Well, there's too much ammonia going in the ground from these protesters, and it's it's disturbing. It's disturbing. Joe, you got some footage of the staged arrest there?
Yeah, I got it. No sound, but let's just watch her smug face.
So she's just smug, standing there with the cops that were arresting her, smiling. There's a boom mic. You'd recognize that, Greg. But yeah, having a gay old time at her arrest.
Photo op. Time for some photos.
Yeah, so this was pretty embarrassing when this footage leaked, and it was funny because it leaked like right after all the pictures of her being carried off.
Right.
And the media in real time, they ran with the story, and you could see in the headlines as the hours went by, as the new headlines came out, it went from like Greta arrested for protesting to Greta briefly detained to Greta. People are
Greta
saying it was a
staged,
hoax. You know?
Yeah.
And even Reuters getting in there and basically saying it's a hoax, but not in the first few lines, and then making the title sound like everybody's calling it a hoax. And then it was.
This whole topic. I was kind of speaking of this earlier when I was at the environment debate, right, with the PPC in 2019.
Yeah, that's why I was interested in that. I was interested in what you were going to say there.
Yeah, but and speaking of these kids like throwing cans of soup at paintings, I realized during this debate that, you know, this isn't even so much about politics. This isn't even so much about fighting for our ideas. I feel like what's on the precipice of like falling into a chasm is just, critical thinking itself. It's like if society continues the way it is with smartphones, with this sort of really non-critical way in which we consume things, with people actually thinking that if we pay a tax, we will change the weather, we are going to go down this path toward Idiocracy. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but we're going to go down a path. We're going to go down this really ugly path of stupidity on totally obscene levels. And yeah, when you see kids, throwing cans of soup at paintings to, stop big oil companies, it's like, oh brother, I'm just worried about the intelligence of humanity at this point. Aside from all the other issues, it's like, are we going to go back to the Stone Ages or what?
Well, it's ridiculous to me because they say, I love how you brought it up. We're gonna pay more money to the government to change the weather. I mean, the weather patterns, they're not gonna change, and they've already stated this. It's not gonna change anything. But what are they doing with the money? That's the question. So they're raising more money.
We're giving it back to you. It's a rebate. Right? So it's not a big deal.
Well, it's a rebate. So they got a rebate for the carbon tax on fuel, but then they have carbon credits. They're talking about introducing all these other new carbons and everything, right? And it's a grab, and they're just grabbing more money. But what are they doing with the money? Like, are they actually like? Is that money earmarked to fixing the climate? And why are so many people mixed up about the environment and the climate? It went to climate overnight. I remember when it happened.
Yeah.
Because it used to be reduce, reuse, recycle, save the environment, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's like
there was a little acid rain period, I think, like in the mid 90s, talking about acid rain. That was a little bit of a thing. And then it was.
But that's a real thing. And let's clean that stuff up. But it's not happening anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because we cleaned it up.
And then it was global warming was the next thing.
But that's climate. So this is where I'm saying they switched it. They did the old switcheroo on us. Because it's like we're talking about the environment. And the environment is something that we want to keep clean and we want to do. But these environmentalists, I can't even call them environmentalists anymore. because I think I'm an environmentalist. I want my environment to be clean. I live not in the city. I live where I could, drive in one direction and I won't see anybody for anymore. I can just keep going.
Yeah.
All I see is bears and moose, and I like it. But in the summertime, when the weather's nice, you get all these cityots. We call them cityots. They're the idiots from the city. They come driving up and they drive through and they go to all the nice camping spots up the valley. And they leave their crap. Like it's just junk in the woods. And they're the same ones that are like tisk, tisk, tisk at the guy in the logging crummy. You know what I mean? Because I have friends that are loggers. Like this is the life I live.
Well, I have a Tesla and I vote for the Green Party. So it's like, oh, you just left a pile of garbage on that campsite. Like, do you mind?
Yeah. But this is the
That's
reality
brutal.
of it. And they'll play hillbilly for the weekend, right? They'll have wildfires, they'll shoot guns, but they'll shoot their lead right over the water. But people from the city don't know that that's really bad because the birds, they go and they eat the lead shot. Because
didn't know this.
Yeah, this is how birds chew, right? They don't have teeth. So they have a thing called a gizzard. And when they eat stuff, they'll also go, like ducks and stuff, they'll go down and they'll grab pebbles out of the ground and they'll swallow them and they'll go in the gizzard, and the gizzard's a muscle and it grinds up the food. And that's how they do it.
So the rock helps them chew food in a way.
That's right. So the rock does the chewing work instead of having teeth. But lead shot over water. So they have specific shot that you could buy for over water, and it's steel shot instead of lead shot. It's more expensive, but people don't buy that. And yeah, it's bad for the environment. You're putting lead out into our streams where we get our water, our drinking water and stuff. So yeah, bad stuff. They don't know. They don't care. Whatever. But tisk, country people, you vote the wrong way. I care about the climate, right? And this is the message we're getting. It flipped. It honestly did.
It flipped, and it was almost like a big magic trick. It's saying, hey, don't care about pollution, just care about climate now. Nothing to do with pollution, nothing like that. No. It's just climate, which is what is climate. And it's kind of the perfect scapegoat for them. It's the perfect sort of invisible boogeyman. You can't really hold on to it. You can't really define
Slippery.
it exactly.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of this debate, this climate debate or environment debate, I made this distinction between, hey guys, remember pollution? Remember when we were all focused on preventing pollution and planned obsolescence, and how these, organizations and corporations don't focus on preventing pollution. They just focus on profits. That is something I can get behind. That is something that, my party is for, blah, blah, blah. But climate change, this is something new. This is something different. This is something that's much harder to define, et cetera, et cetera. And I was trying to, change the frame of the debate to like make that distinction between the two. And when I was met with boos and people turning their backs on me, I'm like, oh man, this is not really even a policy issue as much as a human intelligence issue that we're facing here.
There's a guy that wrote a book, and I can't remember his name. I feel bad now, but he wrote a book. It was called Watermelons, and it was how the environmental movement had been taken over by these people. He calls them watermelons because they're green on the outside, but you crack them open and you see the communist red center of it. And that's really all they care about is they're using these grievances. And we all know about grievance culture now because that's become the new thing. But they'll find these grievances with a thing, and then they'll take over that movement and insert their Marxism. And it seems like Marxism's on the rise worldwide. Like there's a big push towards, and kids have been indoctrinated into this over decades to believe that Marxism's a good idea. And, all that we tried in the Soviet Union and China and, the whole Pol Pot thing and Venezuela and Cuba, like we're not going to learn any of those lessons. But hey, we're going to have AI soon, so it'll work. It'll work once AI's around, right? as the World Economic Forum, I think, is
Yeah, I learn all about this from teenagers on TikTok, Clyde. You know, we haven't tried it right yet. No, it certainly is taking a hold of the youth. And I mean, along with that, it's not just the romanticization of communism and Marxism, but there's also the vilification of nationalism, of capitalism, of conservatism, of Christianity. You know, it's all
but
being
that's, you have to tear down the institutions, right? No matter what the institutions
right.
are, you got to tear them down in order to build
Mhm.
a new thing. That's Marx and Engels 101. But like there, I love how you say the romanticization of the idea, and it's easy to get people behind um, grievance culture, and that's all Marx was. It was all about grievances. The people of
Mm.
the world unite. They're being held down by these awful people. Pin people up against each other and say that they're the bad guys. They're the real reason why everything's bad. Don't look
Mm.
at me over here like turning all the gears. But it's you guys. They did it to them, and go after them. Take all the stuff from them.
It's silly. It's really silly because you know they always and don't get me wrong, there is a lot of problems with you know this kind of behemoth beast of capitalism when we have like these super massive corporations like Amazon, like these big tech companies. And I'm at the point where I'm not a libertarian anymore, where it's like I think we might need to regulate these massive corporations because they might just like swallow everything up whole. But I don't so much want to get into that whole
Okay.
discussion. But my point is, when it comes to these massive corporations, you know, like because you'll see it on TikTok. These kids are like, "Oh, capitalism bad. Like capitalism caused suffering." Sent by my iPhone, and like, yeah, like this is so terrible. This capitalism, it's so horrible. And you know, I've made TikToks about this in the past, but it's like, okay, so your problem with capitalism is there's a small group of people with a large amount of power, right? So why would it be any better under a socialist system where even fewer people have even more power? Like if that's your whole kind of gripe with you know this concentrated power of this corrupt few amount of people who own these large corporations, why do you think it would be any better under a socialist or Marxist system where there's even fewer people with even more power? There would be even more corruption. And if you look at history, that's kind of how it's played out.
It is how it plays
So
out. But like, yeah, the best tactic that I have when talking to people is like, first I'll tell them that, the word capitalism was actually just it was Marx coined that as a critique
mm,
against the market economy. I call it the market economy, you know?
mm,
And I don't use the word free market because it kind of like puts you in a box. As soon as you say free market, people are like, oh, he's one of them free market guys, you know. But
mm-hmm.
I'll say the market
Yeah.
economy. Like, what's wrong with the market economy? Like, I like markets. I like people being able to open up businesses. I like the idea of private property and self ownership. And then as soon as you say those words, they're like, well, I'm not against that. Well, you're pro communism. Like you're pro
Yeah.
Marxism, and
You
the
are against
crux
that.
of it is seize the means of production, remove the rights of property from individuals. This is the fundamental of a market economy. You have to have property rights, and if you want to talk about like, oh, do big corporations should corporations exist even? You know what I mean? Should the entity of a corporation exist? That's a debate that's worthy of having. Instead of saying we should just dismantle property rights wholesale. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I see. I'm learning something. I didn't know that capitalism was a term invented by Karl Marx.
Yeah, it was the book Das Kapital. It was the critique
Oh.
of the capitalist. And he was saying that it's a top-down system because the ones that own capital, they call all the shots. But he
Mm,
never got into the fact that in fact a capitalist is a transient class. The wealthy in a free market or a market economy, the wealthy are transient. They're not a permanent fixture like a caste system, for example, that came before it.
mhm.
Um, yeah, people can move up and down the ladder economically, depending on what they want to put into it. They can consume all their capital if they wanted to, and then be poor. There's the whole rags to riches to rags within 3 generations mentality.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the reason why kids get so obsessed with it is it's, you know, it makes it seem like you can be done, and like, you know, the suffering will just end. It'll be a nice utopia. I won't have to work anymore. I'll just be able to watch Netflix all day. And it that's why they pitch it to kids, I think, because it really is like a fairy tale that they might believe, you know. And that's another I'm trying to work on the perfect joke about this, but you know, kids get pitched climate change and that
Yeah.
the world's going to end in 10 years if daddy drives an SUV that has a combustion engine. And it's like these kids also believe in Santa Claus. You know, like this really needs to be, you know what I mean? Like this really, like we really need to assess what we're telling children. And the fact that they have climate anxiety because of these alarmist climate messages is disgusting. Like that's actually an evil thing. Like we are actually imposing these terrifying ideas into children's heads. And you know, people will say, "Oh no, it's," but now they're becoming climate activists and they really care. And it's like, well, I can see the virtue in that, but it's like they don't even know the reality of the situation because you're misleading them. And the same thing has happened with COVID, where it's like, okay, if you don't wear a mask, you're gonna die. And it's like, I can't believe this is a message that we're like telling kids, like these we haven't even began to see how the consequences of the last 3 years and how it's going to mess with the minds and hearts and everything of children. It's very, very scary.
Yeah, it's devastating. I'm really fortunate, like where I live. We didn't get hit that hard. Our kids,
With restrictions and stuff.
yeah, like our kids had to wear masks in school, but the kids hated it, and like everyone kind of hated it, and it was like pretty obvious that everyone's just like, yeah, we're not doing
Not
it.
into it.
We're not into it. We're
Yeah,
not doing it. So it wasn't like all brainwashing like that.
that's
So
good. And you're right.
yeah, it wasn't like
That's
that. We're going to Japan next month.
that's awesome.
So I don't know if you knew, my wife's from Japan. She's from Tokyo. We
Very cool.
met here in Canada, and we were happily married. And then when after like 3 years of marriage, we moved to Tokyo, and we lived there.
Mhm.
We lived in Japan for 3 years, and it's like my second home now. I love it there. I love
Nice.
the city. I'm not a city guy, but like in Japan, like
Mhm.
Tokyo is just such an awesome city. It's great, and I have a lot of friends there. But
Mhm. What's the mask culture like there? I heard aren't they more about masking in general, even
so it's an
before
interesting
lockdowns?
dynamic there. So in Japan, they've always done the mask thing if you're feeling sick. So if you're showing
Mm,
symptoms of anything, it didn't matter what, even if it was like even if you had
runny nose.
allergies, yeah, runny nose from the
Mm,
allergies, they'd be like, I'm just gonna put a mask on because it's kind of rude to have like snot dribbling down my face or whatever, coughing,
mhm,
all that
mhm.
stuff. So they just put it
Yep,
on because everybody's in such close proximity on the trains and stuff. Like it's pretty packed. And
yep.
yeah, that's just a thing that people do. And when COVID hit, it's
Mhm.
like everybody was doing it. And then
Well, yeah, healthy people, right? Yeah, that's kind of the whole weird part about it. When healthy people are wearing masks outside,
yeah, it was the first
with
time
no
that
symptoms.
was a thing. And I joked because I said like, "Oh, wow, we were so close in Canada to having a culture like Japan. When you got the sniffles, you put something on your face to stop from drooling and snobbling all over everybody." You know what I mean? Like you get that like
Mhm.
achoo, you feel the wet on the back of your neck when you're on the train. Like we were finally in an opportunity to possibly have like just a thing where people don't sneeze on you when they're sick. And
Mhm.
well, no, they ruined that now. So you wear a mask in
Yep.
Canada, you just look like an a-hole. Like you just like that's my first thought. Like this person, I probably would never ever want to speak to because if I ever spoke to him, it would be him shouting at me, to comply with something. You know what I mean? Like that's my perception of people who wear them today, even though they don't need to. It may not be true. It may not be true, but that's the perception. Like that's what people think. Like genuinely, deep down, they're like, that guy's a little tyrant. That guy would boss me around if he had the opportunity to, and if he was given the authority. He's that guy in those what was the experiments way back in the day where they would like they would pretend they were shocking somebody, and there would be an actor on the other side pretending they were being shocked, and they'd be extremely cruel. It was like 1 out of 100 people would just be like really awful.
Yeah, I was dating a pro mask woman once. She ended up being very controlling. Didn't work out.
Really?
That's a bit I'm working on.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. Because definitely lends itself to a personality of being a control freak, without a doubt. And I think that's what was so cool, not cool, but like interesting and fascinating about watching the whole pandemic develop with all the different rules, and how like certain people are like really into it, and really into telling other people to put their mask on. And it's like, wow, this is like a new hobby that
they're ultra Karens though. Like it's like we all know the Karens. You know, the kind that are involved in your like community co-op or whatever, and they're out there like measuring like the blades of grass to see if you've cut them on time and stuff like that, just like report you and feel powerful in the moment. I don't know what they get out of it. I would love to sit down with a Karen and just pick her brain and find out what she gets out of all this like bossing people around sort of stuff.
It's kind of mean, but the people who are still wearing masks, it's like that's how you can tell who doesn't have a personality. Like they didn't have a hobby before COVID, and now this is like their new thing.
They're the NPCs.
And it's like, damn, something like that, man. I don't know. It's
something about the psyche of a person like that. I'm interested because honestly, though, at the end of the day, I've always felt this way about people that are like that, is they were the ones that were, you know, in
bullied.
No. Well, I was going even further than that. I was going to say they were the ones that were trying to find the Jewish people in people's homes back in the 1930s. Like that's the level of like psyche that is in people like that, and that's scary.
And they're the first people to say, well, I would have stood up against the Nazis back then. And it's like, really?
No, you would have been one.
Really?
Right?
Yeah, you just voted that I should be in jail for being unvaccinated. Are you sure you would have stood up against the Nazis? It sounds
Who's
like
that woman in Ontario that you guys have, the Nilly Kiplin, what's her name?
I don't know. I don't think I know what you're talking about.
Oh, she's this like school board trusty, crazy wide eyes lady. She's on the news a bunch, and she's real chippy at people about the masks. She was interviewed in her own doctor's office, and she's like hermetically sealed doors, wearing a mask.
God.
in the interview. Like some of the stuff, and she was the one recently trying to advocate and get masks brought back to the schools in Ontario.
I'm so over all this, Clyde. I know who you're talking about, but it's like, oh man, just let it be over. Can we
let it be gone? Let it be done.
But you're right. These people still exist. They're still campaigning for the masks. Like, oh,
still.
I have a good meme pulled up on this.
Oh, what is
radical maskers in Canada intently watching the CBC to see if they get to go back to screaming at people in stores this week. Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Those people exist, man. They exist. It's gross. It's gross. Yeah, but I'm with you. I'm right with you. Wait, like it's got to be over. But what was it? Just the other week, I did an article or I did a segment, and it was the WHO suggests their new COVID whatever XBB 1.1.5
Yeah.
guidelines, and nobody cares.
Mm.
And that's where
Mm.
we're at. And I made sure to say everybody should be thanking Dr. Leslyn Lewis right now for her contributions in fighting back against the WHO having a treaty with Canada in order to enforce their guidelines on us, or we'd be under those guidelines right now, which is a 10-day quarantine if you're within contact of anybody.
Really, this was because of Leslyn Lewis's efforts.
She was like right at the helm of fighting against this, going against the WHO, and
Yeah.
not a ton of, like, she had some support from the Conservative Party, but not a huge mainstay or anything like that. But she was largely instrumental in making sure that didn't happen.
Good. I don't know. Whenever you bring up the name of that variant, I just think of that awful, horrendous Jimmy Fallon video, or like a little song that he made about it.
Yeah.
It is that is I mean, that's got to be like the definitive death of late night. Like that has to be like it's been kind of like on life support for years now, especially throughout COVID. Like that's got to be okay. It's dead. It's over. Like you just killed late night officially with that, Jimmy Fallon. Congratulations.
Well, I mean,
it's officially just shameless, horrible propaganda. Then again, I guess the Stephen Colbert thing with the dancing syringes was pretty bad.
Really bad. But at least we had Fallon, who was still okay to talk to Trump, even though he didn't get along with him or whatever, and then apologized for it.
Yeah,
that
man.
hurt. They apologized for
awful.
talking to Trump. He had him on, and he apologized for being so cordial with him. Yeah, that's the word.
Oh, brother!
Like you don't have to like Trump, but if he's on your show, he's the president of the United States. Be cordial. Be cordial with Joe Biden. I would think like it's as a host who's supposed to be neutral in a thing, you should be neutral.
That's not good enough though, Clyde. You have to hate him. You have to openly be hostile and hate him, and that's what's acceptable now. And this is back to how far everything's like shifted to the left, right? It's like you can't just be a neutral person. You need to hate right-wing conservatives. Like that's literally what's that's
what they say
to people.
And I think there's an equal hatred the other way too. Like let's be truthful. There is.
I think it's a little different though. I think it's a little different type of hatred.
It is a different type of hatred. I'm not saying it's equal, but there is a type of hatred going the other way. But my thing about this was, the problem is the state's too big. Like the government is too powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's the tyranny of the majority. The thing that was warned against so long ago is that this level of democracy, the ability for that much power to be in the hands of the state, and then you've got two wolves and a sheep discussing what's for dinner. You know what I mean? In the words of Benjamin Franklin. The idea that the state is so large is in itself an idea that you have to have your guy in. Like, I want to get back to the days where the state is so ineffectual at doing what it's supposed to do. They're arguing, bickering, they can't get anything done, no money's getting spent. Let's get back to those days when I don't care who gets voted in. It's not that important. We can talk politics and it'll just be like I disagree with that, you know what I mean? But it's not like life or death for people. It's not business ending if a guy gets into office. It's not going to ruin your livelihood if a particular guy gets into office. And that's the extent that we're at now. We have the left, they're looking at, if the right gets in, well, that's it. All the gay marriage is over, or whatever. But,
exactly. Yeah.
But I think, honestly, like a lot of them are hyped up into this climate propaganda. So a lot of them think that the world's going to end if the conservatives get in. Like the world's ending.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. No, it's
but
go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, but I'm not. Yeah. Sorry. The world's gonna end if the conservatives get in, but they equally, everyone who owns a business is like, well, if the liberals stay in office, my business is over.
I'm
Like
toast.
it's
Yeah. I'm
done.
over. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty rough when it's that high stakes to vote in an election. That's crappy. We shouldn't be here.
But the difference is one of those scenarios is real, and the other one is not.
Okay.
Right? Like one of those scenarios is real in that the companies will be struggling with the liberal government, or do you think, or is that a little bit of an exaggeration, you think, as well?
No, I don't think it's an exaggeration. I think the further these liberal policies go, the
Mhm.
worse it's going to get. They're putting more and more
Yeah.
restrictions on property, which I think is massive
Yep.
when it comes to foreign investment. We need to get more foreign investment here. Like we're in a recession. Like we're in denial
Mhm.
that we're in a recession, but we're in a recession, and we're
Yeah.
threatening foreigners with money.
Mhm.
What are you doing? Like they want to bring
Yeah.
their capital here. They're evil capitalists. They're
Yeah.
With that evil capitalist just hired 2,000 people. you know
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Exactly.
yeah, that's the thing. Now the other side's arguing that if the conservatives get in, then there goes our liberal arts, there goes all the things that we're going to go into, these things that they hold in high esteem. They think that there's, because I want to steel man people as much as I possibly can. I don't want to go like it's
Mhm.
all one way, and that's not true. There are like liberal arts things that people on the left believe that we should uh, really be focusing on. I'd say, yeah, those arts programs and all these other things, they would be fantastic as soon as our house is in order. You know what I mean? You spent us into oblivion. You're gonna have to cut that until we're doing better. That's kind of my
Mhm.
opinion on the whole thing. But I do believe that those things have importance in society. Sure.
Yeah, I think they do. I think they certainly do to an extent. I think it's unfortunate, because I think a lot of conservatives anyway, have just become so cynical when it comes to a lot of federal funding in general, because it does get misspent. It does get, even when it's not a, like, arts program. Just look at the way that some of these crown corporations operate. Like I've lived in Toronto for almost 10 years now, and they've been trying to make this like light rail system for so long. And from what I hear, it's just, well, we got this government contract. Let's not try to build it too quickly now.
Oh
It's
yeah. Oh, okay, I get it.
it's
That's
brutal.
gross. That's gross.
Yeah. So you are right. Like, there are some merits obviously to like, liberal arts funding, but like, let's face it, a lot of federal funding gets wasted, gets spoiled. Like it's this disgusting, like, it's our turn at the trough, my time to suck at the government teat. Like that, like, I hear what you're saying with everything to do with, like, we need smaller government. I'm at the point where we need more moral people. Like the people have completely disconnected with, what it means to be Canadian, what it means to be part of a community, what it means to do the right thing. Like, we have people who are only out for themselves, especially after the past 3 years where everyone's been like isolated. And as the economic downturn continues, people are going to be out for themselves even more. And this is scary because we no longer is it a common, popular and attractive thing to actually be charitable or actually be somebody who's going to help one another out, and it certainly is not something that gets rewarded, right? um so I guess the reason I bring that up is, all we need to do is make a smaller government. It's like, there needs to be a lot of changes, man. Like, there needs to be a lot of changes, and it really does come down to the people at some point.
Well,
And I
it's
don't
a
know what the
cultural
answer
thing.
is.
It is definitely a
Yeah.
cultural thing. I think, yeah,
Yeah.
people being so nihilistic, being so separated from everyone and just like only thinking about themselves, that's not going to end well. Because,
No.
well, we all see where it's going with the CPP. I mean, they're the Canadian pension plan. and the EI and all that stuff, it's all going up right now, but they don't have money for it. Like they don't have money. I put a poll out on Twitter today and on the YouTube channel asking people, if you were given the option, would you opt out of the Canadian pension plan? Would you opt out of EI? And where's it at now, Joe? Where's that poll at? Have you found it?
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up.
So we'll see where it's at. He's just scrolling down for it.
What should I press?
You gotta choose before you can see it. Oh, you gotta log in to choose.
I gotta
log in. Yeah.
And you can go check out the one on the YouTube channel. I don't think you have to log in for that.
YouTube is a good one.
Yeah. So I put this out there and a lot of comments coming in. Like, holy cow, lots of comments. And it's on both sides, the comments. Some people are saying, don't be dumb, Clyde. Well, I'll get you out of there for your sign in so you don't get your password out there. But yeah, some people are saying, no, we have to have this. This is a system because people are not responsible. You're just going to leave them to die if you give them the option to keep their own money and get out of it. And that's a mentality that I think lends to the culture, like you're saying. If like there's a lot of people, oh, you got it now. So there's a lot. Yeah. Okay, a lot of people would opt out. They're saying.
Yeah, most would opt out.
Wow.
But there's still a lot of people saying no. Keep it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I voted earlier today, and I had my own reason for staying in.
Well, you just voice your thing. What did you say?
Sure. Yeah. Like normally I'd be opt out 100%, but the thing that's happening lately is with inflation rates. If you did pocket that money to yourself to save for your pension or EI or anything like that, with double-digit plus inflation, it's not going to be worth anything by the time that you want to go for it.
Yeah.
So like that's the only thing that has me at it. And like if really that at that point in the game, the only thing that's going to save your ass is your grandchildren's income paying for your retirement. And it sucks. I hate it. But yeah,
that's where I think we're at now anyway. I think that's sad. Where we're at now. Like, I think we can skip all the fancy steps and we're at a point where our kids are going to be paying for us or we're SRL or you save independently. I don't think that the CPP, the Canadian Pension Plan, is going to be around for when we retire. I don't think it will be.
No, it's going to crash.
What do you think, Greg?
Well, I'm wearing all black for a reason.
Yeah, you're not just a Jedi today. You're not on the dark side. You're not a Sith.
Every day I wake up, I'm like, I'll wear the black turtleneck again today. No, man, it doesn't look good, and that's why I really, just gonna add context to where I'm coming from. I have gone down this path of like tumbling down the rabbit hole of politics and like looking for answers. And I've actually come to Christ, believe it or not. I'm now, a Christian, and it makes a lot more sense than anything. And along with that, there's a lot of people in politics, more so right-wing politics, who do make the argument of, smaller government, bigger government, this policy, that policy. At the end of the day, we need citizens to actually be moral people, because that's really what's going to make the difference is the culture of the country, of the city, of wherever we are. And that is largely completely lost and forgotten about in many ways in the popular political conversation. And on the contrary, there's this new sort of woke religion that is completely dominating the left wing or the popular establishment narratives. And it's a really twisted and evil sort of belief system that is many different dimensions of messed up. It has a lot to do with hedonism. It has a lot to do with selfishness. It has a lot to do with kind of like your feelings being the most important thing.
Moral relativism, I think, is what they call it, is it not?
Sure, yeah, that's scary because the person who invented moral relativism ended up being somebody who did very immoral things. What's his name? Foucault? I think it's Foucault who came up with it.
That was
One of the most,
the postmodern guy, the guy who's big in the postmodern movement,
yeah,
right?
one of the people from the Frankfurt School, I think, and yeah, one of the fathers of
And
postmodernism,
turn out he
exactly.
did a lot of really awful things with kids.
So one of his friends on his deathbed, who actually died like last year, or like within the past 2 years, he was like, yeah, Foucault would go to, I forget what country it was in, but yeah, he would pay kids to have sex with them in a graveyard at night. This is what this guy said about Foucault. And you know, if you follow the logic of cancel culture, so many academics should be canceled for associating with this person or quoting Foucault. You know, like, you know how they always try to connect the dots of like, oh well, this person talked to this person who is racist or whatever, so they're just as racist. Like, imagine if they applied that same logic to Foucault. Um, you
Yeah, but
know,
they don't seem to be too against that kind of behavior. And like maybe I'm hurling stones, but I think that there's a lot of people in academia and the far left that are actually maybe not implicitly advocating. Some are advocating for
yeah.
the bad stuff about kids. Let's just say.
Hmm. Yeah, no, you're right, and I think that's why. Again, back to the whole Bible thumper argument. You know, there needs to be the counterpoint to this. It's not enough to just say, "Oh, I don't think we should have these people doing things with kids." Like, yeah, what I would hope so, but like the fact that we're even at that point of even having to say that, like, how did we even get to this point? You
Yeah,
know?
Sodom and Gomorrah stuff. Like it's really
Yeah.
really gross. So like when I hear of moral relativism, when I even hear that term, that to me that just sounds like uh, okay, I'm a psychopath and I just need to find out how to convince people
Justify
that
it.
what I'm doing is
Yeah.
okay and I want to do bad stuff. Like that's really all that sounds like to me. Or kids will do that. They'll be morally relative until you
Mhm.
teach them lessons. They'll be like, well, there's this reason why I did this, and they'll try to justify stuff, and that's all that is trying to have a justification for bad, what we all know is bad behavior. And
Absolutely.
do you
And
think
I want to.
religion's the answer to that?
So I will say that I think that I'm very, very suspect and very, very critical of religious institutions.
Hmm.
I think that religious institutions can kind of go either way. They can be just as bad in terms of being like a cult or being like some sort of deranged sort of group of people who have, quite frankly, the wrong ideas.
I think
Um,
that's where my
but
my my hesitancy earlier in the conversation was about when I was talking about the Bible thumpers. When I
mhm,
was younger, there was an evangelical movement that was going around North America,
okay,
and there was all
yep,
these churches propping up. And my parents wanted me to go to church, so I'd go to the hippest, coolest one, and some of them were crazy, like
right,
crazy, like, and it
yeah,
was right around the like David Koresh time, and like there was all kinds of weird stuff happening with religious groups, and kind of going off the
mhm,
rails and getting into. They had their own moral relativism. You know what I mean? Where they would like
oh boy.
justify stuff. Well, Scripture said this, and if you interpret it in this way, it's weird stuff.
Yeah,
Weird
and
stuff.
and that's the thing. You gotta look out for that. You gotta look out for that for sure. I probably should have clarified that earlier. Yeah, to be critical of religious institutions. But no, I think that spirituality in general is really important, and I think that having a strong moral compass of right and wrong, because right now we're dominated by the postmodern, like you said, moral relativist sort of doctrine, woke doctrine, and it's like, okay, if you're a black person in the United States, looting a Target is actually a good thing. Burning down a building is actually a good thing because George Floyd got killed last week, and that's what's good, that's what's right and moral and just.
So how are they
And
justifying? Hold on. How are they justifying that that's a good thing? Or are they just saying it's acceptable?
the fact that you are even asking this question, Clyde, makes you a bigot, makes you a demon in their eyes. That's how their
Bad
doctrine
guy.
works. How dare you
I'm
question
a
that?
bad guy.
Go
Okay.
back and read White Fragility, Clyde. You need to read White Fragility again.
Oh,
No, but
man.
I'm bringing up the whole BLM thing, right?
Yeah.
Because during this time, us in 2020, lockdowns had started. The horrible George Floyd incident happened, and there was mostly peaceful protests. Also,
They got a lot of
record
money for
arson.
that too, hey?
Right.
They got
But
it was some ridiculous amount in the millions of dollars that were donated to BLM, and
mhm,
none of it went into the communities. It went
nope.
into like buying strippers and
And dude,
parties.
like businesses, black owned businesses were burnt to the ground
Yeah.
just in this in this frenzy of rage and frustration. And I mean, something that kind of brought me to Christ was during this time. It was just chaotic, and it was weird seeing all this, like, the George Floyd clip and all these like riots going on. I saw this like black pastor preaching, talking about the BLM thing, talking about George Floyd, and he was like, "The two wrongs make a right. The three wrongs make a right. What about four wrongs?" And I thought, this pastor has like made the most sense more than like anyone over like over the past like couple weeks. So like, man, yeah, I don't know. And then ever since then, the more I kind of meditate on different kind of Christian teachings, it's like this is a pretty actually handy framework to look at things. And I kind of define it as a lot of moral issues, a lot of even like personal issues, um conflicts with relationships, or even like larger parts of the community. A lot of it can be boiled down to the relationship you have with your family, and your upbringing. Like, it all really comes down to basic simple relationships like this, I find. Like, I guess, to give an example, um I have a Christian friend who was like, haha, atheists, like, they're just people who resent their parents and authority figures.
That's
And
interesting
he said
take.
it's
That's
he said it so matter of factly, and I thought, huh. And then I thought about the atheists that I've seen online. I'm like, yeah, could I actually, that's kind of, there actually might be something to that. And
So
yeah, I don't know, like,
I had a bout of like atheism. I don't know if I was ever like
mhm,
truly I think I'm agnostic. I've been agnostic for a long time. It's not
mhm,
like I had crappy experiences with churches, as I was kind of diving into there,
yeah,
when I was younger, and then I was angsty and I wanted to get away from it. I didn't want any power structures over me. So I was a punk rocker and a bunch of other stuff when I was a kid.
nice.
I didn't like authority. So I've just always been against authority. I always thought it was kind of weird
Mhm,
that all the punk rockers turned into Marxists. I was like,
mhm,
that doesn't square right with me, anyway. But
mhm,
but I found that like when it comes to atheist circles, like groups of friends that are like atheists or agnostics, there's
mhm,
not really anything good happening there. Like, it's just
mm,
a lot of people. I mean, you can't really get together on something that you like. The only thing that you have in common is you don't believe in a thing. You know what I mean? But I've
yeah,
come like years later. I mean, like I've never been really that much of a spiritual person. I mean, I am somewhat,
mhm,
but like it's just not something that comes up on a day to day, like who brought the universe into existence and all this stuff,
right, yeah,
and but it doesn't bother me that people believe that, or the
mhm,
stories that they believe, whatever stories they believe.
yeah, why not?
And I think the
Why not?
traditions are fantastic. Like that's the thing that I don't like about like agnostic or atheist movements is the baby being thrown out with the bathwater. Is the whole
Mhm,
idea is you nailed it, because I found that to be the case. I don't feel angsty about religion anymore, or my parents or anything. Like, I get along with my parents well. Um,
mhm,
but I do see that in other people, and I do see this tendency to just like, well, I want out and I want to get everything out with it. And so
mhm,
we're switching over to moral relativism because it means I can get away with all the things that I wanted to get away with, and I can justify it. And it's not good. It's not good.
Yeah.
You need structure.
And the thing is like the argument that, whenever I see a debate between an atheist and like a Christian or something, I always feel like they completely miss the mark in terms of what they're talking about. I don't watch this content often, but if I were to be in a debate to argue like against atheism or like for not even necessarily Christianity, but like believing in some sort of like higher power, I would come strictly from like a practical standpoint. I wouldn't be hung up on, oh no, there's records back. Jesus Christ was real and he was risen. And like, there's all these records. Cause like sometimes they get caught up in all of the records from, thousands of years ago and
I
how
mean,
it was real.
do people really argue that Jesus wasn't a man? Like Jesus was a man and he lived.
It's honestly,
he had disciples. He was you know what I mean? Like all that stuff happened. I believe it happened anyway.
From what I can tell, though, Clyde, like there's all sorts of information, misinformation, this account, that account. Well, that account doesn't account for this. And I've never looked into it personally.
At the end of the day, does it really matter that much, though?
I don't think it really does. But because the argument I would make kind of to criticize atheism is that it lends itself to nihilism. It lends itself to hedonism, and it lends itself, I'm sorry, to depression. Because when you kind of have this worldview that, life is basically meaningless and you kind of make it up yourself, you're going to be predisposed to being more depressed. You're going to be predisposed to this, that, and the other. And whereas, when you lend yourself to something more spiritual, something like Christianity, it's like, oh, you have a purpose to try and do good in your life. And then the counter argument is, oh no, well, of course, as an atheist, you just figure that out on your own. You just figure that out on your own to live a good life. And to that I say, and this is not something that people talk about, and I think they should talk about it more. These atheists who are arguing this are typically white people in developed Western countries. And it's like, if your parents weren't religious, their parents probably were. And you grew up in these different countries where what's around everywhere? There's a lot of churches everywhere.
Yeah.
By osmosis, even though your generation didn't grow up to be religious, the generation before you did, and everyone else around you kind of did in some way or another. And that's why it's funny when when atheists will say, well, human nature is just being, a good neighbor, and people are just good people.
But they aren't. We went through 2 years figuring out that they aren't.
Exactly.
we need something else in there to guide people in the right direction. And it needs to be a cultural thing, not something forced down on them.
Right. And it's funny that these atheists would think that because they grew up around a lot of like religious people. They think that it's just human nature to be to be a good neighbor or whatever.
Am I wrong to think that atheists tend to be statists?
Am
I wrong to think that?
What's the proper definition of a statist?
Like someone who thinks the state or feels highly of the state, and that the state should or has a role or has a large role or ought to be in charge, as opposed to like
go either.
As opposed to like what would the argument be? It's a necessary evil instead of like, you know what I mean?
I think that could go either way. I think a statist could be like a hardcore lefty or a hardcore like Christian nationalist. I feel like that could go either way.
Okay, fair enough.
In terms
Maybe
of
I'm
who's
just
more
reading
likely
into
to be,
it too much.
Statist. But
yeah, interesting concept. But like, I think religion is extra valuable in society. Like I said, the baby in the bathwater. Like if, again, I didn't like where I went to church. It doesn't mean that I can't teach the teachings of what I was taught when I was a kid to my kids. My kids are in an interesting situation because my wife was born and raised in Japan. They're Shinto Buddhist. That's the religion of the land there, right? And when we're there, we go to the temple and we do the thing. We wash our hands and we throw the coins in, and and that's cool. And
what's the coins for? I've never heard of this.
Oh, it's good luck, but it also helps the temple because they do other things and they need. It's like tithing at church.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the same idea. but there's a lot of trinkets and symbolism involved. But yeah, my kids get to see that side of things. And we took my kids to the church a few weeks back, and we went into this Presbyterian church. Like, we're not a member of any churches in our town, but we're not object to it. So I know people who aren't particularly, like, I'm not particularly religious, but I'm not against it. You know what I mean? My kids can make up their own mind. If they like the stories and they like what's being taught and they like the community, go join it for sure.
Yeah,
I'll facilitate that. You know,
I think in general, and I think a way that religious institutions really get it wrong is, you know, when they push stuff too hard on kids, and like when they kind of like really almost you know, try to terrify them into submission, it ends up having like the opposite effect, and it makes them more defiant and it makes them more rebellious. But there's a lot of criticisms too, that I think religious institutions, but I think that's one of them. Like sometimes they come on much too strong, and it really turns people off.
Well, I think that's true. My dad had a joke when I was younger. He says, "You know, you're at the wrong church when you have to bring your own snake."
Bring your own.
Yeah, so there's this thing in certain parts of the U.S. where they have Baptist churches where they snake handle. Joe, do you have any video of that? Show like the Baptist church snake handlers. Oh, you never heard of it? Okay, that's why you didn't get the joke.
Never heard of this.
That's funny. So, yeah, they have like, so to prove yourself worthy to God at His altar. Let's pull this up. Have you got it? You got a good snake handler video? They go up to the altar holding the snakes, and they're venomous like rattlers or whatever. And if you don't get bitten, God's favorable with you. And
what the hell is this?
That's what I'm saying. There's some crazy in there's crazy in non-religion. There's crazy in religion, dude.
I don't know, man. I don't know, because another, you know what they say, you know,
look at him dancing.
Conspiracy dude. You know what they say in conspiracy circles? They say in conspiracy circles that like some religious institutions, Christian ones, have just been like subverted by like evil Satanists, right?
Yeah, possibly.
Like, I'm sorry, I don't know what.
Holding the serpent, here, right?
Yeah, what? This is was this in the book? Was that King James version? What translation was this? To be making out with snakes during on Sunday. I don't remember that part.
I've been bit 116 times, it says on the screen.
Oh my God, man.
Oh man.
I take back everything I said, okay? I'm no longer Christian. No, I'm kidding. But what the hell?
No, but that's the joke, right? So that was the joke, right? So my dad said, "You know, you're at the wrong church when you have to bring your own snake." Like, and the joke implies that having a snake is normal. Oh man, that's funny. Wow, I didn't know.
How have I never heard of this?
Everyone knows about the Westboro Baptist Church, but they don't know of these guys, I guess.
Yeah. Oh my God, snake handlers.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. That's a part of the religious institution. But this is where it could go haywire, right?
Yeah, a little bit. What sect is this again? Baptist?
I think they're Baptists. Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, or somebody's going to correct me in the chat. But Baptists tend to believe in like a literal translation of the scripture.
Oh, okay.
So this is where you get like the young Earth creationist types, which is a big mainstay for going after Christians with the atheist movements. So they'll go after the young Earth creationists because there was this big move to get into the schools and advocate against. And this is where I was kind of again on the if they're advocating pendulum swings the other way, you might get some of this. But right. Not to teach kids about Darwin's theory of evolution because it's blasphemous. and
Mm.
the Bible says that the Earth is literally 6,000 years old, and
Mm.
yeah, a bunch of stuff that myself I think is pretty nonsense,
Mhm.
and I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that agree. So, and I'm sorry if anybody believes this stuff and I'm calling it nonsense. I mean, you believe what you want to believe. I don't. It doesn't bother me. I just, yeah, I don't want like science banned from my kids, education institution.
Right. But in a way, it kind of already is becoming banned, right?
Isn't
When
that
we have
weird?
things like
Isn't that weird?
critical race theory getting like creeping in,
Here we are
and
going
the
full circle
gingerbread.
again. We're going full circle
Yeah.
again, where they've flipped. It flipped. It was the young Earth creationists in our lifetime, in my adulthood. Young Earth creationists were the bad guys that were
Now it's
threatening science and the institutions, and now it's gender theory. It's all this COVID-19 stuff. You can't question the
mhm,
science. There's
mhm.
science, and then there's the science.
Yep. Critical race theory is getting in there as well. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. How would you define this religion, this sort of new woke sort of doctrine?
Well, you see, I always kind of thought of it as a form of statism. I thought that that's what that was. I thought it
Mm.
was this idea that, well, the state should be running everything. The state is the institution that is the helm. Like the Vatican used to be the one to tell you what science was okay when science started
Mhm.
developing as an actual thing. And
Right.
Galileo, he was under house arrest for the rest of his adult life because he dared to go against what the theologians were saying about how the makeup of the universe, right?
Hmm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
well, he just empirically figured it out based on the data that was in front of him. And he's like, well, I
Hmm.
can't deny this, so I have to go with it. And but it was the institution that held the helm of the science, and we have that again. And it's people vying for the position of being the authority over what is science as opposed to discovery. It's dangerous.
I have a word for you guys.
Oh,
Scientism.
scientism.
Scientism is the
Yeah.
opinion that science and the scientific method are the best or only way to render truth about the world and reality.
While
Huh.
the term was defined originally to mean methods and attitudes typical of or attributed to natural scientists, some scholars, and subsequently many others, also adopted it as a pejorative term with the meaning an exaggerated trust in the efficacy of methods of natural science applied to all areas of investigation, as in philosophy, the social sciences, and the humanities, which have been suffering. What's that called? The reproduction crisis or reproducibility crisis or something like that, where they're finding all of these papers that they've put out over the years. They can't reproduce them, and
Mm.
if you can't reproduce the science, it's junk science. But
Yeah,
somebody who
yeah.
follows this cult of scientism, they will adopt it as if it is the single and sole truth about the world.
Mm. Oh,
Interesting.
you hear
So
that a lot. You'll say citation, and then people will say, "Oh,
source.
that paper wasn't peer reviewed." It's like, yeah, but the study was
Yeah.
performed. Like read it.
Hmm.
Oh, but it wasn't peer reviewed. Well, does that matter? But yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Scientism.
And
That's
and
insane.
and scientism essentially is putting in the utmost faith
The
in the
institutions.
experts.
The
Yeah.
institutions, not the experts, because the experts don't always agree. So, like for example, Patrick Moore, he's an expert when it comes to well, he's a forestries guy, so he'd be an
Okay.
expert when it comes to things to do with the climate. But he's going after this whole like climate scientism, I guess you could call it climate scientism, where it's
Right.
this idea of consensus or whatever, 97% of
Right.
scientists. Well, I'm not interested in the 97%. I'm interested in those ones that, why do they disagree? Like unanimity is one thing. When you see unanimity in something, you're kind of like, well, I guess the sky isn't green,
Everyone,
you know?
everyone agrees. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every single person agrees. Yeah.
But if you see dissent, it's like, well, who are the dissenting voices? Like, do you have thousands of scientists and, a handful of them that are actually the scientists in that particular field that disagree with all the other scientists that just like, yeah, I choose that
Yeah.
politically. That's a political battle at that point, right?
This is actually how I persuaded my own dad to not get the booster shot, believe it or not. I said, okay, although let's say there's 9 out of 10 scientists or doctors, 9 out of 10 of them say you should take the booster shot, but one of those 10 say no, and their name is Peter McCullough, and then these are their qualifications.
Yeah.
Like kind of emphasizing to my dad, like, this scientist who disagrees has much, much, much more qualifications on safety boards for different pharmaceutical products, and I don't know his whole background, but cardiovascular, whatever. Like, could you see how this one doctor, although he's like a dissenter in the group, might have a more valuable opinion? And it actually kind of clicked with him, and he actually ended up watching a Peter McCullough video. So
he's
there
like
you
one
go.
of the most published scientists
Mhm.
in all of
Yeah.
science, not just
And
in
it's
his
weird.
field. It's crazy.
It's weird that how they have everything both ways, right? Where they say, okay, it's the consensus. So like the most amount of scientists, because like, there's a prestigious institution. And it's like, well, what about this guy with all of the, accolades and everything? Oh, no. That guy with all these like, extra, badges and, accomplishments. No. It's the consensus of these people over here. They get to always constantly switch what's right and what's wrong. And that's the thing about like everything to do with this kind of woke doctrine of experts in scientism. The rules exist, but they constantly change. Like, because the rules are really based on mantras, right? The rules are based on sort of like these catchphrases of trust the experts, safe and effective.
That reminds me of the thing
Um,
Joe told me the other day. He says, they wouldn't have any standards if they didn't have double standards.
yeah. No, yeah, man. And it's, dude, the double standards are actually, I'm at the point where it just pisses me off, man. Like, because I said this the other day on a show, Controlled Opposition, that I'm doing with Jeremy once a week. We talk about controlled opposition, fake opposition in the Conservative Party, and how they're not really standing up for us and making moral arguments when they should be. And if in Canada there was a BLM protest and a police horse was there and crushed a protester, we would never hear the end of it from the news media. Oh my
No,
God,
never.
the racism, the white supremacy, colonialism, police, and like white people, all this stuff.
They'd be having
We would never
candlelight
hear the end of it.
vigils with like effigies of horses on two legs and whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like it's haha, like double standard, but it's like I'm at the point where it's like I'm so sick of it, man. I'm so sick of it. It's actually so abhorrent and disgusting. And I know, like, I'm trying to keep this light here, but it really gets my blood boiling.
Yeah.
And actually, can I actually go into another topic as well? Because this is super
Absolutely.
related.
Absolutely.
It's this, and I'm not sure if you covered this, but I haven't seen many people covering it at all, other than kind of getting it shared around on Twitter, which is the clip of this woman being choked in a hospital in
I
Toronto.
haven't. I was thinking about talking about that tomorrow. I might actually do a story about it, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I have all the details. Do you know more about it?
Yes. So not much more than from what I've seen on Twitter or in a couple of articles, but essentially what they say is, like, the coroner said, yeah, okay, it looks like she died from asphyxiation based on like a struggle, like basically defining someone getting choked to death. And it's a very creepy security clip, because as they start to apprehend this woman, it's like, it looks like a hospital care worker and then like two security guards. The security camera pans to the right so
Yeah.
they can't see anything, and then like a moments later, there's someone lifeless is being dragged away. And again, some people might think this is a crazy comparison. Actually, do you want to play the clip while we have it up?
Yeah, let's put this up.
Yeah, I got it up. Ready?
Yeah, so I saw this before. You can see, watch, they move the camera to put everything in frame right here.
Mhm.
So they make sure that everything's in frame here. And they even move it back
they
because
move
they're
it
like, oh,
back.
it went too far out of frame. And then the woman goes off to the side, and then it just shifts way over.
Yeah.
Like that seemed intentional. And then later this lifeless woman's being brought out. Now, what were the circumstances?
Those guards, I thought I heard earlier today that the case was dropped.
That's
exactly.
what I read. Yeah.
That's why it's in the news again. Yeah. And I'm not sure if the clip was circulating before, but yeah, essentially it's because she didn't have her mask over her nose. Like, it was just because she had it like under her chin or something. And that was the whole reason.
And they attacked her.
Yeah. And this was in 2020, actually. This was I think it was May 2020 when that happened.
Like, it looked like
And,
she was trying to get away from them at the time. Like, I can't see them justifying and saying that she had attacked them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, she looked like they were getting up to confront her, and she was trying to flee.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we were talking about double standards, and it's like, okay, if we're going to criticize someone in this situation, it would be the security guard. It would maybe be the hospital. It would maybe be the healthcare system. Like, that is kind of the perpetrator, or at least like people who kind of need to answer to the situation that's happened. I don't know. What do you think?
What the hell kind of system do you have where what's going on there? It's way too fishy, because there's a third party who's not seen in there, who's moving the camera away from the conflict as if they know what's about to happen. And I mean, that's just me speculating, of course. But if
you're right though.
You have security cameras for a reason. Why would it go on the and it didn't go on the Fritz, because we could see that it moved one way and then it moved back.
Yeah.
So you can't say like,
it was
wasn't
following.
working.
It was following the action at the time, and then all of a sudden it turned away.
And it was right at the time that the security personnel went in to move in on her.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's terrifying. It looks damning. It looks really damning, that footage.
And maybe you'll call me a right-wing reactionary for making this comparison, but let's compare that to George Floyd. It was on camera. It was an authority figure apprehending somebody who had, broken some rule, and then they die at the arms of that authority figure apprehending them. Riots, total outrage, BLM, huge movement. It becomes this virtuous thing. Even Justin Trudeau taking a knee for George Floyd. And from what I can see in Canada with this scenario, no one's talked about it. Maybe Randy Hillier once tweeted about it.
I never understood the Canadian BLM protests for George Floyd. I never could understand that. Like, why would you go to Ottawa to protest against what happened to George Floyd, which is under jurisdiction of where did it happen? Illinois? George Floyd?
Minneapolis, I think.
Okay.
Minnesota, Minneapolis.
Yeah. So it happened there, which is under the jurisdiction of their local ordinance, not even the federal government. But they had protesters going to Ottawa, Canada, and the Prime Minister of Canada coming out and taking a knee on behalf of this. Again, it's getting into that, like, it's just the actions for a thing, and they don't care about the thing. It's
and it's platitudes. I mean, you kind of touched on it earlier, where you said how left-leaning people or left-minded people think, oh my God, like, we can't let the conservatives come back in because they're gonna hunt down gay and trans people. Like, they have this totally absurd idea of what would happen if conservative people got elected. And I really think that is a huge part of their talking points and their platform of kind of keeping people in this sort of strange world where conservatives are just like these horrible, evil people. And so obviously they're going to latch on to anything that kind of comes back to that argument. And of course, BLM and George Floyd is one of those things, because it's like, hey, remember, people, like, conservatives, fill in the blank, some sort of like ominous implication about conservative people being evil, basically. And I bring this up, or like I believe this to be true, because I have a lot of, I call them normie friends, who consume mainstream media, CNN, and I press them on things and I poke at them and like see what they think. And it really comes back to this. That comes back to like, well, I agree with you on this. I agree with you on this. I would never agree with the whole transgender thing, but you're racist and I can't agree with you. It
What?
actually comes back. Yeah,
They'll
man.
actually say that to your face,
Absolutely.
but you're a racist?
Not, but you're a racist, but I don't want to stand with, because there's racist people over there. So I can't stand with you because there's a racist person over there somewhere, and I could never stand with that
Where
person.
are they? Point them out, because I'll go after them
It,
too.
it's
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like that's where I stand. That's where I stand. I love it when people try that with me that don't know me, obviously. I mean, I'm a race mixer myself. I've got mixed kids and they're beautiful and they're fantastic. And I love my wife and I speak her language as much as I possibly can.
Oh no,
And
but she just hates herself. She hates herself. Your kids hate yourself. No, you don't understand. It's a whole. You need to wait. You need to read White Fragility, like I
you know what I
said.
get when I say that? They say I'm a cultural appropriator and I fetishize.
No, they
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, they do.
Oh,
There's always an angle, right? And it
you don't
sucks.
love your wife. You just fetishize
I just
her. Yeah,
fetishize my
yeah.
beautiful
I
wife of
fetishize her so
16
bad that I
years.
made kids with her. That's how bad. That's how hardcore my fetish is. I made kids with. Wow. Man.
Unreal, right?
I got some data to sort of tie a bunch of these things together. Doesn't appear to be popping up.
Oh, I lost your feed. What happened? Did you close your window?
No, I didn't close it. I guess it timed out. Here we go.
I'll have to bring that back in. Bear with me for 1 second. This is going to be one of those behind the scenes clips where everybody knows what's made, what's in the
how the sausage is made.
Yeah, what's in the nougat.
I
like saying nougat because nobody knows what nougat is. You don't want to.
Earlier in the podcast, Clyde, you were mentioning how you were thinking that, or you've already seen a big shift in the culture itself, going against a lot of these ideas.
Oh, okay.
And what I have pulled up that should appear shortly.
Just hold your thought, because this is going to go silent for a second as I bring it back in.
Okay.
There we are. We've got that.
There we go. We have a graph here showing, do you support or oppose the Black Lives Matter movement? And it shows negative support or opposing it and positive support. And since July or spring 2020, BLM has seen a massive drop in support.
Oh, okay.
That's a huge shift away from it. I mean, it's not an election year thing because it only seems to go up every 4 years. But in it, you can click through a bunch of data. For example, if you click on Democrats, you can see their opinions haven't changed. They still say, yeah, that's the anti-racist movement. I'm part of that.
Right.
Republicans, there's not much that they can really change because they already vehemently oppose it. But the really interesting one that I find is the independent voter, the person that everybody's trying to rally support behind. They have a massive drop off in support for it. So like the more that they push these narratives, that it could be the pride stuff, it could be the transgender stuff, it could be this race baiting stuff, it appears that it does have an impact on society and it's not in their favor.
Interesting.
I mean, maybe the word's actually getting out. Like what's actually been going on? Because, well, we've had what protests, the chop that they had in Seattle. They had
Yeah, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone.
Yeah, what is that? I find it funny when you get these anarchists, they get together and they call themselves anarchists, but I mean they're all about authority. The first thing they do when they tear it all down is they create their own systems of authority. That's not very anarchistic if you think, but
And again, I want to know how many times they had to order pizza to their little chop zone. You know
that's
what I mean?
funny.
Like, how autonomous was it really? Like, why is there all these Starbucks cups everywhere?
Where's the autonomy? Where's the autonomy if you got Starbucks and Pizza Hut?
And of course that iconic little garden that they made, and it's just you guys are just
that was beautiful.
Yourselves.
That was beautiful.
Yeah,
because I love watching people that know nothing about farming try farming.
Right. and people who talk a lot about the environment, right? They talk a lot about the environment and they don't know what they're doing.
Holy cow. Like me and the wife, we do a garden in the backyard and it's a lot of work.
Nice.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard work. And if you don't do it right, you get no yield. Like nothing. Right. And
so you guys garden specifically for like, crops and stuff, or
maybe I'm like, I have a touch of the autism or something, but like when I see flowers, I'm just like, in a garden, I'm like, but you could grow potatoes.
Yeah, what a waste.
I'm not gonna eat a flower. What are you doing?
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. You got the prepper mindset. You're
maybe
you're hungry.
Maybe I just don't see a use
you can't
in something
eat a flower.
if I don't get anything
rose.
out of it. Yeah,
you can't eat this rose here. What is this?
What's the point if you're not getting something out of it? If you're putting all that toil into it, get a meal at least.
It makes sense to me, man.
And the food was great. Like we did potatoes. We had an entire crop of potatoes fail last year. Entire crop.
Oof.
And then
was it a pest? Was it a?
I think it was we didn't know what our soil stuff was. Like we didn't know the pH and all this stuff with the soil. And they grew so nice. Like the plants grew, but they yielded no potatoes.
Oh man.
Right?
But then we
did a second crop and it was fantastic. So
nice.
We learned some lessons. But go ahead and say what you're gonna say.
No, I was just gonna say gardening is it's so magical, isn't it? Like these seeds turn into these things that we can eat. And yeah, it's I helped out a neighbor with gardening in the spring, and it was really nice actually. It's nice working in the dirt with your hands,
It's funny though, because then you end up with like too much of something. You're like, I got cucumbers more than I can eat. So people take these cucumbers. Everybody cucumbers. All my neighbors had cucumbers for a few weeks. All my workmates are eating cucumbers. Like, Clyde, no more cucumbers. Stop bringing them.
Just to go back to the whole chop or like autonomous zone thing,
because that was funny watching them try to put like what was it? They're all organic farmers, and they were using Roundup, and they were using Miracle Grow brand. Whatever.
It was just a sad sight, right? It was just a sad sight to see. Hey guys, we started our own garden, and it's like, I don't think this is gonna work. And I just wanted to compare it to like the trucker convoy, because the trucker convoy was like really everything that the autonomous zone wanted to be. Like there was
in the middle of winter, not to
in the middle of winter. Yeah. People had
this is rubbing it in too, right? Like not only did we survive where we wanted to be, but we did it when it was like the most inhospitable time of the year.
Yeah, and it's man, I really try not to have animosity and all this static towards like people who live in Ottawa, but like it's really hard.
I believe it. There are good ones, like the workers, like like the people who worked at the restaurants and stuff that let people in.
There's actually the person who was I was renting an Airbnb from. After I left, they were like, by the way, like I saw your videos online, like you're doing great stuff.
Awesome.
And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like there's a lot of people in Ottawa who are definitely like supporting us, but I guess like, the vocal people who oppose the convoy. And it's like, I'm sure these are people who are like, pro BLM, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Dozens and dozens of them.
They're just jealous. This is an epic protest, and it's effective. And it's like, you guys are just jealous that we're actually doing something cool here. But something this is sort of changing the topic, but I really think if the people in Ottawa wanted to actually mend the divide and like help the country sort of like actually create unity and even help the economy in Ottawa again, they would they wouldn't get rid of Winterlude, but like Winterlude is like this winter festival that they have in Ottawa, where you can like, you can skate around the canal and everything, or the Ottawa River. And it's like, why not? Because Winterlude is not really based on anything other than the name winter. Why not create the Trucker Festival every winter, where it's basically a winter festival, but you just add trucks along Wellington Street, have a hot tub, have a jumping castle, just like there was during the trucker convoy. This would be an international like tourist attraction.
That would be
It would
awesome.
boom. Dude, it would boom the economy in Ottawa. And guess what? It would actually make me like the Trudeau government for like, hey, at least they did that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't that be a cool feeling for them to actually, okay, we were wrong, and to like correct everything. We're gonna have this like, annual we're gonna rename Winterlude and add trucks and stuff. That would
But
be
they
so
can't
cool.
do that. They can't. They screwed the pooch on that too early. Before the trucks had even left British Columbia, they had already decided what their narrative was going to be. And this came out in the inquiry into the Use of the Emergencies Act. They already figured out what their narrative was going to be.
Was it that early?
It was that
I thought
early.
it was like it was like, I thought it was like only 4 or 5 days before it started. It was like an entire week.
No, it was like as soon as they got wind of it, before even the prime minister knew about it.
Wow.
Like the office of the prime minister, when they were talking, they were like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's what the messaging is going to be. And they were sending messages back and forth to each other. This all came out. And they're like, okay, if it travels along, we're going to say this about them. They're, the keywords started coming out: fringe minority, unacceptable views, all these things, right? And all the stuff that Trudeau said. And as it started gaining steam and getting bigger and bigger, he comes out and says it. And now he's dug it. He's dug his grave. And he has to lay in it. Because if he backs down, then he loses face and all this other stuff. Like, he'd probably have to resign. I don't know. He probably won't. He's done a lot of things like ethics violations and not resigned. It's so, like Rogan says, he's a creepy dude. He's just a creepy dude.
It's so awkward too, because it's like you're dealing with such a big narcissist, and that they can't admit that they were wrong or apologize.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, we all know that you messed up, we can all see it, but you're not going to apologize. It's just such an awkward situation,
But it escalated so bad because you couldn't just back down from that. So they'd already made up their mind what it was going to be, but then they just play it out to its inevitability, when the inevitability was declaring a state of emergency in the entire nation of Canada and coming out and beating the crap out of a bunch of peaceful protesters that are right outside. You could have just talked to them. They're disagreeing on policy. They're disagreeing on a policy. Like, that's just that's too far. That's too far. When you really realize what the nuts and bolts of it are, that the guy just was listening to some biddies in his office that were, whatever, hires back in 2015 because it's 2015. That's why I chose my cabinet. Do you remember that?
Of course I remember that. That was the first big Trudeau quote.
That killed me. That killed me when I heard that. Yeah. Why did you? Because I remember at the time the debate was going on only a year before or something. Maybe it was a few years before that, but Harper had hired on some like minister, some bean counter, right? Somebody to be an economist or whatever. And the big thing was, he's not bilingual in French and English. His French is terrible. Like, yeah, but he's a good bean counter.
Yeah. Let him do his job. He's good at his job. So
Like
who cares?
that's the most important thing. And then Trudeau gets in. And he's like, so why did you choose this cabinet of diverse individuals? Like, let's just say that because it's 2015. No, it was a political decision. Come on, like, and I have nothing against with choosing people that are right for the job, be it however they look or what do they got between their legs. I don't care, as long as they're the best for the job. That's all that matters. That's all it should matter.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at history, you can find a lot of quotes from great men, from great leaders. And you get the total opposite when it comes to Justin Trudeau. You get these quotes that are totally mindless and meaningless and almost like just bafflingly it's just like pointless. And a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. Like somebody should slap that guy in the face.
He
'Cause
said that
doesn't
was a
mean
quote.
anything. You haven't heard that one? A Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. I think he said that twice. Dude, I actually have
Is
these
he
clips
quoting
on
that
my
old what is it? A rose is a rose is a rose. That was an old poem.
I don't even know, man. But this is if I'm not mistaken, one of the times that he used this quote, a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian, is right after he pardoned Omar Khadr or gave him like $10 million.
He gave him $10
There's
million.
a couple.
For people who
Yeah.
are watching that don't know that, this guy, he was a convicted terrorist, and he
injured one American soldier and blinded or killed one and then injured another, I believe.
with
two
a
American
grenade.
soldiers.
With a grenade.
Yeah.
And it,
when he was underage, but
Yeah.
he was still, I think, 15 or 16 at the time. And then he spent some time in Guantanamo Bay, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah.
And and then he was like asking the government for $10 million.
They're like, yeah,
And
sure.
yeah, okay. There's a couple of news conferences with Trudeau kind of explaining his reasoning. And there's a clip that leaks from Rebel News recorded. And it's very creepy because Trudeau says, Canada believes that terrorists should be able to keep their Canadian citizenship. And people like laugh. They laugh at when he says this out of like kind of like nervousness. And he's like, because I do. And then like right after this, he makes this whole speech about, we need to stand up for Canadians' rights, even when it's inconvenient. All this stuff about Canadians' rights. And it's to give Omar Khadr $10 million.
So I agree with those sentiments though. Like, okay, so you're a Canadian citizen. You can't have your citizenship stripped because you committed a crime. You can't, of course, stand up for the rights even when it's unpopular. But he doesn't do that for all Canadians, for one. And why this one who was convicted of a terrorist attack, and then why $10 million? Why did he just get $10 million? What was that about?
Yeah, it's totally weird. And when you compare it to the treatment of people standing up against mandates, it's like who is this guy? Like he's going to make this whole speech about to stand up for a terrorist. And then he's going to, call it a fringe minority, people who are standing up against mandates, and then call them terrorists. I guess he never technically said that, but, in a roundabout way, kind of his administration certainly did the paperwork.
He called them people that stand with Nazi flags. Like this is the guy that, well, we don't know who that guy was with the flag that went out there and the other guy with the Confederate flag. But I mean,
right.
Those were plants. Come on. Like those were plants.
Most likely. Yeah. It's
like me, not saying that it was him, but like it was, there was somebody that was not for the convoy. That's for sure. They showed up on the first day and they were gone and were never seen again. Like,
and I mean, even in the scenario that it was not a plant, it's like, it's completely irrelevant. Like there was so many more other people there. Like I try to make a meme where it's like a sea of Canadian flags, because that's what you would see at the convoy. And it's like, maybe there's one like crazy person there. It's like, that doesn't, just because there's one crazy person there, that does not like disqualify the entire like thousands and thousands of people around there.
Right.
All the overpasses, all of the people driving from across, like, it doesn't
But it forces
invalidate
you
all
into
that at all.
whataboutisms, right? Like, well, what about CHOP? And what about the churches burning down? And what about the statues that they tore down? It forces you into that sort of argumentation. And then that's always it's a whataboutism, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But back to what you said earlier, it's like, you just have a conversation with us about mandates. Like, that hasn't even happened yet. Like, even during the election
That's true.
before in 2021 of the fall, this pissed me off so much. They didn't even have a debate topic on vaccine mandates or passports. It's like, this is not a serious country. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, you're having a televised debate and you're not going to talk about how millions of Canadians aren't allowed to go to a gym or a restaurant anymore. Like, oh no, it's a democracy. You voted us in. And it's like, no, man, because the news media has failed us. It's not really a democracy anymore. Like, that, you kind of need a real mass media for it to be a real
for the
democracy.
people who did take the coercive shot, right? Like, they were coerced into it. And they're like, yeah, okay, well, now I have to walk around with an ID card and show it everywhere I go. What the hell kind of world are we living in? What the hell is this? In British Columbia, you had to go to restaurants. In restaurants, a lot of them, because this was
across the province.
Across the province, yeah. And you had a QR code that you had on your phone, and you had to scan it to go in places. And I just I got the coercive shots because I wanted to go to Japan, and then I never ended up getting to go to Japan. This coming up trip is going to be my first time there in years. Since COVID, like since a year before COVID. So like, I did it for that, and I still didn't end up getting to go. And so I feel completely duped. I remember going to get it, and the lady's like, well, you're doing the right thing. I'm like, no, I'm being forced to do this. So let's not pretend. Do it. Get it over.
She was all chipper, and
she was chipper. And then she was like, oh, but jeez. you could see the sentiment of a good chunk of the people walking in the door there. They're all feeling the same way. And
yeah, and the government always loves to tout, we did our part and we loved getting vaccinated. No one felt forced into it at all. And it's like,
well, I'll tell you, for one, like, I didn't, if it wasn't coerced, I wouldn't even have considered it. I don't get the flu shots. I don't do any of that stuff. Of course, I'm vaccinated for all, like, diphtheria or all the things that, like, you have to get vaccinated for. I have my kids are vaccinated for all the things, hepatitis and all the things. But like, this was a different scenario. This was like, oh, well, we're granting immunity to these companies. Why would you grant immunity to them? It's totally safe, effective. Why would they need blanket immunity? If right off the bat, like, it just got weird. It got weird right off the bat, and I wasn't for it. I wasn't keen on it. And then, it turns out, like, oh, okay, well, why were they demonizing all these, like, things that they could, treatments for it? And then you find out that it's written in the laws in Canada and in the United States and a bunch of Western countries that they can't have emergency measures if there's any form of treatment. So they can't use emergency measures to speed along the approval of a thing if there's an effective treatment in any which way or whatever. And then you find out, well, that's why they're going after the ivermectin. That's why they're demonizing the chloroquine or hydroxy, whatever Donald Trump was saying. And they're like, people were drinking fish tank cleaner. Turns out the man who died from that, it looks like that woman murdered her husband. She was
really.
Oh, did you hear about that story?
Joe, I don't think I heard about this story.
Maybe if you got it, you could pull it up. There's a woman who claimed, my husband died of poisoning because he drank fish tank cleaner because hydroxychloroquine was written on the label, right?
What?
Get
That's
this.
crazy.
Get this. So the man ingests it, dies at the hospital. Um, turns out she was not a fan of Trump. She was this like crazy lefty lady who was, all over social media posting about her Trump
I just read
derangement
the head.
syndrome
I
and
just
stuff.
read the
Oh,
headline. I just read the headline. Like, this is crazy, man.
Yeah.
This is crazy, dude.
Yeah, woman who blamed.
Woman who blamed
Okay,
Trump.
go ahead.
Yeah, woman who blamed Trump after giving her husband fish tank cleaner, now under investigation for murder.
And this was the headline that all the news media went with. They're like,
Yeah.
Trump is convincing people to use hydroxychloroquine. This is the only case of a human consuming fish tank cleaner in all of the world. And this became the narrative worldwide to demonize this product. That's just insane to me. But then when you find out that it was actually demonizing these products, they can't be effective tools for fighting this virus if we want to have this emergencies measures. We can't have the emergency if there isn't an emergency, because there's a way out. There's treatment. That's crazy.
I like this fact here. Wanda was a prolific Democratic donor, and she believed Trump in hydroxychloroquine.
Oh my!
Was her excuse,
right?
It's because of Trump. And this is funny because when you do talk to a normie and about Trump, this is one of the ones that comes up. And I'm trying to think of the other ones, but
bleach. He told people to inject.
He told people
bleach.
to drink bleach. Yeah. It's one of the go-tos. It's one of the go-tos.
Which again, it was another fake one that didn't happen. It's not something he said.
It's silly. But another one to add to it was and I even knew this, like a good friend of mine, and he's like, "Oh, ivermectin? You mean the horse paste? You mean the horse paste?"
I had a coworker say the same thing.
Yeah,
a coworker.
And it's
says,
like,
I was like,
guys,
no, they got to you too. You're usually a logically minded person, and you're saying horse paste about a medicine that was, it's been around.
It's been around for what, like 30, 40 years.
It's generic, which is bad.
It's won some award. It's won some award as well, or like the person who made it won an award.
I thought they were the two men. It was one Japanese guy and another guy who developed it, and I thought they were nominated for a Nobel Prize for their discovery of ivermectin.
Yeah. Something like that.
I believe
something
that
like
to
that.
be true.
But the point is that it's been tested many times on human beings. So no, it's that horse paste narrative is just.
Well, here's the thing. So I ended up misreporting something, and I had to come back and apologize for it. Because I was reporting on it because it was like, even if I disagree with the thing, I'll report on it.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, it's not my popular opinion. There was a study that came out from Brazil saying that ivermectin had little to no effect on COVID-19. And I was like, I'm reluctantly, sharing the news that this came out. Well, it turns out it was a total bogus study. And here's how it was like real bad. It was real bad because, for one, the doses were super low in this study, like ridiculously low. And not to mention, all of the people were already taking ivermectin for like other infections or other, like, what is it? It's for parasites. So they're in Brazil and they're already prescribed ivermectin for parasites, and they were all enrolled into an ivermectin, whether it works on COVID-19 or not, study, given very, very small doses of it. And then they had their control group, but there was no control group if everybody's on it. So like, there was very little difference between group A and group B. Well, yeah.
And this is what's terrifying about the scientism, right? Where it's
insane.
like the science, it's like you're just you're blindly trusting like the headline of this study, essentially.
Well, I read into the study even myself, but like, I'm not a scientifically trained individual, you know what I mean? And people called me out on it, and they're like, no, check this out. Sorry, I got it wrong. I had to make another video and apologize, and I did it. It's the right thing to
No,
do when you get something wrong, but whatever. Like I
it's
got duped,
I don't
and
know.
it's easy to get duped.
I've debated with doctors on TikTok doctors, if you will. Dr. John is this one guy. I don't know if he's a real doctor, right? Like, it's very sketchy. But and I kind of make like the common sense argument, because it's like, no, like you need to get jabbed, you need to get the shot. And it's like, well, what about, these early treatment things that at least show some evidence of working in some cases? And it's like, no, we can't use that. It's irresponsible. We can't use that. And I'm like, so wait, hold on. So if there's somebody who gets diagnosed with COVID, and like, you're just going to tell them to do nothing and hopefully it doesn't get worse, like, how is that the best idea as a doctor? Like, why would you not? This seems like the only illness that's like a big scary illness. Seems like the only illness in history where, until a Pfizer product came out recently, there is no early treatment at all. We don't suggest any sort of early treatment. Like, how is that responsible as a doctor who wants to stop hospitalizations and deaths? How is that responsible to not at least try an early treatment that has at least shown some evidence of working for people? And of course, he
Videos were being
deflected.
taken down at the time. I remember, like all over social media, doctors that were recommending like early treatments,
Yep.
they were all getting taken down, and it was scary. It was terrifying.
That's got to be a huge red pill for a lot of people in the medical community too. Like, how many doctors who are now like, who have really probably lost faith in their institutions, right? Because like, I know a doctor, a friend of a friend, and I've talked to him about this a lot, and like, he can't even tell his patients what he thinks about these injectable products. Like, he can't even tell them flat out, because if they were to rat on him, he would probably lose his license.
Yep.
So he has to basically like speak in code. He basically has to like, spell it out for them. Like, well, this new booster, they only tested on like a few rats. So yeah.
What do you think? And it
What
only
do you
protects
think?
you. It only protects you from last year's bug.
Yeah, what do you think? Oh man, it's crazy.
But
Crazy
the
times.
common cold is pretty bad. It's really what it comes down to. This XBB 1.5, the whatever drone.
Yeah, it's jump. You know what that was? That was jumping the shark. That Jimmy Fallon thing was the COVID jumping the shark.
It was.
Of,
People are done
hey
with
guys,
it.
we got a new variant name, and it's like, this sucks.
We're enthusiastic. Join us
Yeah.
in this new like fear porn. Oh,
Like,
it's
maybe
it's
if you
crazy.
would have stuck with the Kraken, that would have had a little bit more success with that.
I had too much fun with the Kraken, because the Kraken, the mythical beast that kills everything in its wake. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
It's a great name for the
Crazy, man.
the household common cold, and insane. And that's where we're at right now. And this is where we should be celebrating this. We should be celebrating the fact that it's become like so non-virulent. You know what I mean? Like it's
exactly.
it spreads really fast, which is also good, because then that means it becomes this inoculation for the entire.
Yep.
We were talking about herd
You're
immunity in the beginning, right? Herd immunity
Yep.
was like the big topic. Once we get to herd immunity, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right? And then herd immunity will be like just around the corner. And here we are 2 years later. Jimmy Fallon's getting you all excited about the new thing that you're never going to be done taking shots for. They've got a new myocarditis facility going up in Quebec, I hear. That's I'm sorry.
It's a Moderna.
Sorry,
facility.
I mispronounced it. But
might as well be yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah,
we got 10 years worth of this stuff coming. The government's guaranteed they're paying for it, and nobody wants it. I mean, there's a lot of people there's some people that want it, and by all means, it's the coercion that's my issue. It's the coercion.
Yeah, I don't know. When I try to explain it to a normie, I explain Coca-Cola. It's like, what do you think the Coca-Cola board of directors do? They sit around in a room and they strategize, how can we sell as much sugar water as possible? and they try to think of how many marketing messages they can get out there to sell their sugar water. You could say, in a way, that they're conspiring to sell you as much sugar water as possible. And, these massive pharmaceutical companies are the same way. They are trying to sell as much of their product as possible. They happen to have a lot of ins in media and the government. So, yeah, they're going to have a little bit more sophisticated messaging and this type of thing.
Yeah, they
But
don't
it's
have the
about
best
as much of it.
track record, though. They've been selling, heroin, fentanyl, opiates, over-the-counter stuff, oxycodone. They've been getting people hooked on opiates for years, and they've settled lawsuits. They settled one of the biggest ones recently. I don't know if Joe, if you could pull that one up. There was a giant lawsuit that came,
And they lost.
and they lost, and it was the biggest one ever. And it was humongous.
What else do you need to hear other than that, honestly? Because I remember when I was doing the research early days, when the whole like pushing of the shot was happening, and I saw that the Pfizer thing, what Joe's about to bring up, and I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. That's enough. That's enough for me.
Oh, you're silent, Joe.
Sorry. Yeah, this was last year.
This is a fact check.
I have to. Yeah.
Okay, you'll have to weed through that. Get back to us.
What company was it?
It was all of them. Pfizer. I thought. I think it was Pfizer.
Oh.
Pfizer was the main defendant in there that lost in that whole case. But yeah, it was insane. But like for me, it's been mostly about the coercion. The coercion's been like my big issue. Like, take this for example. I was working at a shop a bunch of years ago, way before any of this all stuff happened. And the boss came up to me. He says, "Hey, so we had a safety person come by and said, people need to have respirators when you're doing clutches and brakes because of the dust that comes off. And these respirators, they need to make a clean seal on your face. So you're going to have to, clean shave." And I've always had a beard. And I said, and I just looked at him and I said, that is the crappiest reason for me to quit a job. He never brought it up again. He never, ever brought it up again because I'm not cutting my beard off for some stupid thing that's never been an issue forever. Right?
Good for you.
But that's it.
Good for you.
That's the dumbest reason why I'd ever quit a job. I'll get another job. I'm not cutting my beard off. Sorry, not happening.
Yeah, and it's too bad that more people didn't stand up. And maybe we should go back to one of the initial topics you brought up, which was, you said that you grew up in Canada, but you've also been to Japan, you've also been to the States, and you were talking this whole time, why aren't Canadians giving a crap? Why aren't Canadians more vocal about
why do we just roll over?
What's going on in their politics?
Why is it that we just
roll over?
Yeah, why?
This has been something that I've been kind of been increasingly terrified of confronting as I've kind of gone down the political rabbit hole, because as I go down further and further, and as the country kind of, goes through lockdowns and everything and more, it's like I'm just further and further disgusted with the people in this country and like how they are just kicking back. It's all, well, that doesn't affect me. Yeah, but it's affecting a lot of other people, and it's only getting worse. Like it's going to affect the future of this country. Like nothing pisses me off more. I'm sorry to say, but like when it's like an older baby boomer who are in their 60s and they're like, well, I'll be gone soon, and it's like, F you. Like, what kind of attitude is that? And there's a lot of things, like a lot of really sort of. It's hard to talk about, but it's like, where is the honor that Canadians have in their own country, their own family, their own, nation? I think that Trudeau has done a number at completely like undermining it, belittling it, and just destroying it. Right? We're a post-national state now, according to him, whatever the heck that means. But I think that that's
globalism. That's this whole idea of globalism, and I have a hard time because a lot of people, they think that being against globalism is being an isolationist, because this is the stuff they're being told. If you speak out against globalism, you want to shut the borders down, and you want to
Right.
No, it's about having individual trade deals with other countries and setting the bar and having a market, have your country compete as in a marketplace amongst other countries, not having this top
Mhm.
down conglomerate. This whole idea of globalism, what people are saying when they say globalism, is central authorities, like in Europe, essentially saying, dictating how everybody's gonna live and what the prices of everything is gonna be. How's that working out with OPEC? We all hate the oil prices. Do we need any more cartels like that? And that's what
And
people
it's
mean when they say globalism. Sorry, I just had to, because I had a bit of pushback before with some people, and they're like, "Why so anti? Global trade's a good thing." Well, that's not what I'm talking about. Global trade is a good thing. It's a great thing, but not
mhm.
not at everyone's expense.
Yeah, and it is in a sense a buzzword, and of course, like globalism or globalization is inevitable in terms of global trade, but
That's a good, yeah, and
it's
that's
the
a good
globe.
thing. But we can do it
Yeah,
different than the oligarchs and these
yeah,
central planners want.
and yeah, and exactly. Like the simple thing is, listen, these are people who don't live here. They don't live in my local neighborhood. They don't live in my province. They don't live in my country. And they are dictating what happens in my local neighborhood, in my province, and in my country. Like that
Yeah.
should be a red flag for anybody paying attention. Um, and I think beyond kind of just like the dictation that we're getting from from the UN or from the World Economic Forum, I think along with that, this is something that the PPC tried to champion, which is like, Canadian values. And that's something that I don't think this Conservative Party even really does well. And Trudeau has kind of tainted it. And like like Trudeau has basically said, hey, being Canadian is like being a doormat. Okay.
Or being a
It means giving out.
racist. He's telling people that he's telling people that Canadian values is a racist concept, that other people can't
Mm,
espouse Canadian values, that we can't introduce people into our country and to enjoy and join us with our values. He's that's the message I get from him.
interesting. Interesting. So he's saying that like there is no Canadian values in your opinion? Like that's what he's saying?
That's what I think he's saying. What I think he's trying to portray is we shouldn't be caring about Canadian values. We should care about the values of the immigrants that come to our countries and their
Right.
individual what they
Yes.
come and bring to the table. And I think that's great. I think it's fine if people come and they have their culture, because this is what we want to share. We want to share cultures, but we should all share cultures, including Canadians. We should share the Canadian culture with all the newcomers, and we can all get along in a new, more colorful Canada. But just like to say that there is no Canadian identity is just that's damning of what already exists here, and saying that it needs to be replaced. And I can't get on
And
board with that.
this is the leader of our country too.
Yeah.
He's like, "Hey guys, yeah, this is our great amazing country and, it's all about the newcomers. Come on down." It's like, like show us your culture, show us what you got. You can do no wrong. You know what? The people who live here are actually kind of racist, so really don't pay attention to
That's
them.
gross. That's
Um
gross when I
it's I speaking of gross, I sent something in the chat here. I don't know if you can bring it up. It's not like an article or anything, but somebody brought this to my attention, and he's an Indian guy. He's a PPC supporter. Sometimes he sends me some intel and ideas for videos. And this is a YouTuber who is a like an international student, and
okay.
he is making a YouTube video in Windsor, Canada. And he's like, hey guys, here's a life hack. I got $500 worth of free food by going to the food bank.
Oh
So he's like,
no.
yeah, dude. He's just like robbing the food bank and being like, yo, look at all this food I got for free. Thankfully, there's comments in this, in this YouTube video that are like, yo, I'm a conservative now. What the hell is this? And people being like, this is so shameful, dude. Like, you're not supposed to just take food from the food banks. But this is a consequence of a country that is not imposing values on newcomers.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, really kind of trying to celebrate what it means to be Canadian. And unfortunately, we have refugees and immigrants coming here and international students who are treating it like an all inclusive resort. And on a psychological level, if we don't have respect for ourselves, then why the heck should anybody else respect us or treat us with any sort of decency, right?
Yeah, that's gross. So I have a story for that. When I was we lived in Japan for 3 years, and when we moved back, we moved back kind of down and out and in a hurry. It was right after the big earthquake in 2011, and
Okay.
when we moved back, we moved to Whistler, and that's because that's where we lived before. So we moved back there, and we had accommodations set up, and that fell through. That was kind of crappy, and then we basically had to spend all of our savings on like first and last month's rent and all of that, and we were just sitting in a room
Wow.
with no jobs and hungry, right?
Wow.
And it was tough. So what we did was we went to the local food bank because it was a time that we needed it. And when we went there, everybody that was in line, well, not everybody, but a lot of people that were in line looked like they were just there because there was the party, and the party was more, it's a ski
There
town.
was the party.
It is a ski town, right? So everybody had gone to parties and they spent all their money. So the party was the priority. So they just went to the food bank for food instead of paying from their wages for food. And while we were in line, a Range Rover came rolling up, and they skipped the queue so that they could go in and get their stuff and then come back out. And we were standing in the queue, and my wife and I were like, this is messed. Right? So after...
This was in 2011?
This was in 2011, yeah.
Wow.
And when we got back up on our feet, we remembered everything that we took from them, and we donated it all back. And then we vowed not to give back to it again because we weren't going to feed into that. But we were obviously going to pay back what we took from it. So we give to charities. We're not giving to that one, unfortunately, because of how it was being abused. And they just weren't doing anything about the abuse. Like I want to see people that are taking advantage of stuff. I want to see a little bit more scrutiny in my charities. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And once again, man, like where's the honor?
There's none.
Like
There's none. It's gross.
Oh boy. Oh boy. We got to clean this country up.
We do.
Clyde, I don't know how we're going to do it, but I guess we'll make more content like this, and hopefully that'll help.
Hopefully. I really like having these conversations. I'm going to have you back because like this, we're going just on 3 hours now, and it flew by. It flew by. It didn't feel like we were chatting for 3 hours. And this is what I want. This is what I want. I'm glad I was able to have you in a situation where it wasn't like I got to deliver a theme and a story and all this stuff. We could just like switch subjects willy-nilly and talk about what it is that we want to talk about. Thank you so much for coming, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope your audience doesn't think I'm too much of a crazy far right Christian person. But
so what?
No,
what if they do? I don't know. It's fine. We should have all kinds of flavors in this country. Yeah. Everybody.
Yeah, and it's not even that I'm necessarily that. Like I still think I'm very much like more liberal minded at heart, but I just think where everything is going, I think it's important to actually stand up and champion like the further right idea, because I think it is valid to be talked about and kind of just defended, because like I said, like, I'm just so tired of only the far leftists getting to like spout all their insanity. And it's like the best counteraction to that is not to compromise and not to give them excuses. On the contrary, it's completely reject what they're saying and say, well, actually, there's this thing called the Christianity, which kind of defined the nation of Canada and kind of how it came to be. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm going to try championing that for a while and, trigger the libs or whatever. That's not really the goal, but
no, but definitely
supposed to disrupt the conversation.
Well, disrupt the conversation, but actually find value in life and find value in community and all that stuff. It's amazing where you find stuff, like places that you wouldn't imagine, like going to a church, just walking into a church and finding a beautiful community of people, like I say maybe even some of those moral relativists should try it. Just walk into a church, maybe visit some people that, or into a mosque or a synagogue. I don't care. Just like
Yeah, you
go into
name
one
it.
of these places.
And it's funny because Canadian, or not Canadians, people have a craving for spirituality, and you'll see a lot of people who are in the postmodern world getting into like a lot of new age stuff and crystals and horoscopes, and it's like it's really close to to spirituality or to like an organized religion, believe it
I
or
think
not. Maybe
that's
not an
why I never
organized
went
one,
off the
but
deep end, because
mm,
like even though like again yeah, God could exist, and that could be fantastic, and I'll I live by a lot of the values that I learned as a child growing up with Christianity. I'll teach my kids the same values, and I'll teach them the story of
mhm,
Jesus and all of that stuff. That's great, and let them
yeah.
draw their own conclusions from that, as I did myself. um but even though like I'm not a practicing religious person, I didn't go off the deep end in another spiritual way. You know what I mean?
Mm,
I think I feel myself fortunate that I didn't have that craving that sent me into the world of dowsing rods and crystals and things like that. Who knows?
mhm.
Who knows? Some people get into psychedelics to find themselves internally that way. I think there's some merit to that. I don't know.
I've heard like microdosing is becoming this popular thing, which is pretty wild.
Yeah,
Um,
but it becomes a
I
religious
don't.
experience for people where like you said, like maybe they're just looking for religion. That's not the popular
Mm,
one.
yeah, and I mean this is a whole other topic, but we talk about normies. Why don't they care more? And what is something that kind of defines Canadian culture or popular Canadian culture right now? The Trailer Park Boys. And what are the Trailer Park Boys? They're high and drunk all the time. And it's
Mm.
like, how are we going to get the people to care about what's happening if they're sedated most of the time, right? Like they're drunk on the weekends, they're high in the evenings. Like it's really hard to get somebody to actually understand like what's at stake and what's actually going on in the world of politics, or to even listen to anything beyond something that Trudeau might have to say on TV. It's hard to really kind of get their attention and um, yeah, get them to care, right?
I guess you got to clear your mind before you alter it, I guess. I don't
Something
know.
like that. I
Something
don't
like
know.
that.
I don't know. I
Anyway,
don't know.
it's been 3 hours now. So I got to have you on again because this has just been such a fascinating conversation. Love having you. Where can people find you?
Yes, find me at Google me Greg Wycliffe. Search for Greg Wycliffe on YouTube. I'm also Greg Wycliffe on Instagram and TikTok, and my Twitter is GDUB. But yeah, I'll see you around. Thanks so much for having me as well, Clyde. I'm honored you want to
Absolutely.
have me back on and hear my incoherent ramblings and my black turtleneck. But yeah, I appreciate
You
being
just
on.
your Jedi Sith powers are drawing me in. That's what it was. All right, and
Yeah.
that's that.